Chapter 571. When Jiao Sero led tens of thousands of Uzun iron cavalry up the hill, it immediately caused a huge impact on the enemies fighting on the hill. Nay! The war horse galloped. An Uzun soldier became one with his horse and rushed up the hill. The heavy hooves of the horse slammed into the shield of an Annam Protectorate soldier. Ah! Amidst the screams, the huge force sent the Annam Protectorate soldier flying high into the air. Bang 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 bang. One after another, Uzun iron cavalry rushed up the hill. Every time an Uzun iron cavalry charged up the hill, a Tang dynasty soldier would be sent flying. As the most powerful army on the mainland, the Uzun iron cavalry instantly displayed a combat strength that far surpassed that of the White Stone Legion. Even though their speed was greatly reduced due to the terrain and the steel walls, the power displayed by the Uzun iron cavalry still surpassed that of Meng Shi Zhao. Those who block me shall die. Following an earth-shattering tiger roar, the Zifidan Jiao Sero of the 5 tiger generals also became one with his horse and charged into the battle on the hill. Rumble, a powerful shockwave spread out in all directions with Jiao Sero as the center. Ah! All the Annam Protectorate soldiers, horses, mud, rocks, and gravel were sent flying by Jiao Sero. Even some of the White Stone Legion soldiers who couldn't dodge in time were sent flying by Jiao Sero. Clang! Even a few pieces of steel walls that weighed thousands of kilograms and were pieced together by countless modules were uprooted by Jiao Sero and sent flying. The heavy steel walls came crashing down. Bang, 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 a large number of Annam Protectorate soldiers fell. All of you, die. The helmet on Jia Siluo's head exploded, sending his disheveled hair flying through the air. With a leap, he dismounted from his horse and entered the Annam Protectorate's battlefront. Boom, a huge, solid halo of thorns shook the crowd. Ah! Amidst the blood-curdling screams, the Annam Protectorate warriors were sent flying like ragdolls. Although these experienced Tang dynasty elites had gone through many trials and tribulations, they were still insignificant in front of a top-notch general like Jiao Sero. Boom, boom, boom. Jiao Sero charged left and right, but no one was a match for it. A captain of the Tang dynasty rushed forward and tried to stop him. However, when he was still 30 feet away, he was sent flying by Jiao Sero's vigorous energy. While he was still in midair, his chest had already caved in. He was breathing more in than out. Ha ha ha, brat, what kind of bullshit tactic is that? It's nothing in the face of absolute power. You're dead meat today. Jiao Sero seemed to have gone mad as he shouted in the Uzun language. He treated the Annam Protectorate before him as an incarnation of Wang Chong. All of the Annam Protectorate were treated as Wang Chong, becoming his target to vent his anger on. Bang, bang, bang. Jiao Sero was like a human-shaped tyrannosaurus, killing wherever he went. Behind him, the morale of the Uzun soldiers was greatly boosted. Tens of thousands of Uzun cavalry followed behind him, slaughtering the Annam Protectorate soldiers in front of them. Ha ha, so the Tang people are nothing more than this. Last time, they only took advantage of the storm and the darkness. These bastards don't dare to fight us head-on. Well said, ha ha ha. Kill them all. All of the Uzun soldiers regained their spirits. This was especially so for those who followed Jiao Sero and experienced 2 major defeats. Before this battle, everyone had a deep shadow in their hearts. But now, everything was gone. Kill. The addition of the Uzun soldiers completely changed the course of this battle. It also changed the balance of power between the White Stone Legion and the Annam Protectorate. In the entire northeast corner, wherever the Uzun soldiers were, the Annam Protectorate strategy was almost completely disrupted. Feeling the momentum of the Uzun soldiers, the Meng Shi Zhao soldiers in other directions were also greatly energized. Everyone, don't be afraid. The Uzun soldiers are making their move. Block them. The Annam Protectorate is not invincible. The Uzun soldiers are their nemesis. Everyone, do your best. The Tang dynasty is about to lose. They are no match for us. All the White Stone Legion soldiers had originally been afraid and only thought about fleeing, but at this moment, their morale soared, and they began to resist the Tang dynasty and the Annam Protectorate with all their might. For a moment, the Annam Protectorate was unable to do anything to them. The situation was rapidly turning for the worse, and with the Mengshi, Yusang forces working together, the situation was extremely disadvantageous to the Tang dynasty. On the other side, a smile appeared on Zhao Wujiang's face. It really is as young master said. The Uzan still can't hold back. As Zhao Wujiang listened to the fighting on the other side of the mountain, a smile appeared on his lips. Besides intercepting Duan Wuji, he had also received another order for this attack. Everything was going exactly as Wang Chong had predicted. Even the timing of the Uzan soldiers' attack was exactly the same. Jiao Sero, this time, you won't be able to go back. Sheathing his blood-colored saber, Zhao Wujiang smiled as he pulled on the reins of his horse. Ignoring the battle before him, he turned his horse around and rode toward Jiao Sero's position in the northeast corner. Jiao Sero, I've come to deal with you. This shout was like a great bell, resounding through the clouds and audible even from several li away. Humph, you overestimate yourself. A cold snort came from the northeast corner. At almost the same time, Jiao Sero led his army and charged in Zhao Wujiang's direction. Although Huishu Wuzong had intended for him to break through from the northeast corner, that was only because the White Stone Legion had the fewest soldiers there. But that was only because the White Stone Legion had the fewest soldiers there, and it was also the best place for Uzan's cavalry to rush to the top of the mountain. But in Jiao Sero's heart, the most important thing was to defeat the White Stone Legion's commander-in-chief, Duan Wuji, Zhao Wujiang. What's the point of defeating the weak? Only by defeating the strong can I prove my worth. This had always been the principle and deep belief of Jiao Sero, the Zifidon. Bang! The divine horse galloped for more than 700 feet. The crowd on the top of the mountain was densely packed. In the end, Zhao Wujiang felt that the horse was too slow. He leaped up from the horse's back and with a flash, landed on a steel wall more than 10 feet high. He leaped into the air, and when he reappeared, he was already on top of another steel city wall that was over 100 feet away. Beneath Zhao Wujiang's feet was a thick halo of thorns, sparkling endlessly. It made the armored Zhao Wujiang look like a god, and he could be seen clearly even from several li away. This dazzling light immediately attracted the attention of the crowd on the summit. Even Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen couldn't help but look over. As one of the high-ranking generals of the Annam Protectorate, Zhao Wujiang had an illustrious reputation in the southwest. There was practically no one who did not know of him. Even the illustrious king of Mengshi Pavilion, Jelifeng, and Crown Prince Fenjie had heard of his exploits. It's Zhao Wujiang. Crown Prince Fenjie's eyes widened. In Mengshi Zhao, Zhao Wujiang was absolutely a special existence. After all, he had been a friendly envoy of the Tang dynasty to Mengshi Zhao, and he was inextricably linked to the establishment of the White Stone Legion. Before Mengshi Zhao and the Tang dynasty had fought, even in the 6th Zhao of Irai, Zhao Wujiang had an extremely high reputation. The people of Mengshi Zhao had a very complicated relationship with Zhao Wujiang. Thus, even though Zhao Wujiang had defeated Duan Wuji, the people of Mengshi Zhao did not feel too much hatred for him. But the War of the Southwest was of great importance, and Mengshi Zhao simply could not afford to lose. Imperial Father, I will lead the troops. Fenjie raised his brow and immediately prepared to go. Jelifeng was moved, but she glanced at Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong and immediately restrained herself. Wait a moment. Now is not the time for us to act. If we interfere now, we will make Huishu Wuzong and the others unhappy. And it is time for the Mengshi Zhao, Yusang alliance to put in some effort. The first part was still in Mengshi Zhao, but the second part was spoken in a dialect that very few people in the 6th Zhao of Irai could understand. But, Imperial Father, if Jiao Sero acts, the Tang dynasty will probably also send a general. Before, when Duan Wuji acted, didn't they send Zhao Wujiang? Fenjie froze for a moment and then switched to a dialect that very few people could understand. Humph, that's not something for us to worry about. As long as Wang Yan or Xian Yuzhongtong doesn't act, Jiao Sero will be able to escape unscathed. Right now, Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong are both at the summit. Don't you see that Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen are standing there, unmoving? Fenjie was startled and subconsciously glanced at them. As expected, Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen were motionless, their expressions calm and relaxed. Yes, Imperial Father. Fenjie's tensed muscles slowly relaxed, and then immediately began to relax. Bang! Halfway up the mountain, a blazing white flame blazed. Jiao Sero had finally activated his clone, and the enormous halo of thorns around his body suddenly turned and retracted into his body. In the next moment, Jiao Sero had disappeared, replaced by a massive Zifidon that was rapidly charging over the steel walls. Finally, boom! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. As countless people watched, Zhao Wujiang and Jiao Sero leapt high into the air from two steel walls that were separated by Tensum Zhang. Stellar energy blazed around their bodies, and they were like two meteors, one red and one white, that crashed into each other several dozen zhang in the air. Boom boom boom. In the blink of an eye, two completely different types of stellar energy fiercely collided in the air. In that instant, the two of them simultaneously unleashed over 100 attacks. Ah! Just when everyone on both sides was staring at the sky, Zhao Wujiang suddenly screamed as the sword-fanged beast Jiasiluo's claw struck him in the chest and sent him flying. Boom! Dust flew into the air as the ground where Zhao Wujiang had landed cracked open. General. Chapter 572. Haha, what Zhao Wujiang? He's just so. Jiao Sero couldn't help but laugh after sending Zhao Wujiang flying with one claw strike. Zhao Wujiang was quite famous in the southwest. Just based on his relationship with Duan Wuji in the White Stone Legion, Zhao Wujiang was one of the top figures in the southwest. To be able to send Zhao Wujiang, a famous figure of the Tang dynasty, flying with one palm strike was undoubtedly a great honor for Jiao Sero. If I kill Zhao Wujiang, I'll have killed 12 famous generals of the Tang dynasty. Jiasiluo heartily laughed. Zhao Wujiang's war halo was obviously not as good as his Zifidon's halo. At least, his attack couldn't break through Jiao Sero's clone. As one of the supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple, unless Jiasiluo encountered someone on the level of Wang Yan or Xian Yuzhongtong, or was surrounded by many powerful experts, very few people would be able to break through his powerful defense. Zhao Wujiang, don't even think about leaving. The Zifidon used all four of its claws and leaped high on the modular steel wall, pouncing directly at the place where Zhao Wujiang had fallen. Go! Zhao Wujiang's reaction was faster than Jiao Sero's. Before Jiao Sero could pounce, a blood-red light shot into the sky from the rolling dust, pouncing toward the mountain. Ha ha ha, you can't escape. Jiao Sero laughed loudly. His eyes narrowed, and a strong killing intent shot out from his pupils. Zhao Wujiang was still very far from the top of the mountain. Even if Wang Yan, Xian Yuzhongtong, or other generals of the Tang dynasty came to help, it would still take some time. Now is the best time to kill you. The killing intent in Jiao Sero's heart burned. Under normal circumstances, it would be very difficult to kill a person like Zhao Wujiang. Now that he was injured, his speed of escape was not fast at all. Moreover, this was the best opportunity to kill him. Die! Jiao Sero shook its claws. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The Annan Protectorate warriors of the Tang dynasty were sent flying in all directions. Protect the general. The surroundings were in chaos, and the soldiers rushed over in a frenzy. Get out of my way. Jiao Sero's earth energy exploded. His entire person was like a prehistoric giant beast. That vigorous earth energy was condensed into a solid substance. The thorny halo that was as sharp as a blade vibrated crazily. Almost no one could get within 3 feet of him. Bang! Jiasiluo pressed his 4 claws against the ground as he chased after Zhao Wujiang. Not good, Jiao Sero is being impulsive. At the base of the mountain, Fenjie couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he saw Jiao Sero charge into the Anam Protectorate's ranks by himself. Don't chase a cornered enemy was not only suitable for bandits, but also on the battlefield. Jiao Sero didn't even have a single guard by his side, and yet he wanted to chase after Zhao Wujiang. This was a great taboo. This guy doesn't understand the art of war. I have to get him back. Fenjie was extremely anxious. Unlike the other generals of the Uzun, Fenjie did not have a good impression of the other Uzun generals. On the contrary, he got along very well with Jiao Sero. Together, the two of them had killed no small number of high-ranking generals of the Tang dynasty's Anam Protectorate. On the battlefield against the Tang dynasty, their cooperation complemented each other. Wait a moment. Jelifeng called out to Fenjie. His expression was solemn as he stared in the direction of the mountain. Look over there. Don't you see anything? What? Fenjie's eyes focused, a hint of astonishment flashing through his face. You underestimate Jiao Sero too much. If he really didn't have any intelligence, do you think he could have reached his current position? And he's ranked second among the 5 tiger generals. Look carefully at those Tang dynasty soldiers around him. Do you really not see anything? Ah! Imperial father, you mean? Fenjie's pupils constricted as he finally realized something. Those soldiers are charging forward to protect Zhao Wujiang with their lives. If there was an ambush, it wouldn't be like this. There are only 2 possibilities in this situation. The first is that there was no ambush at all. Jiao Sero saw this, which is why he dared to chase after Zhao Wujiang. The second is that there really was an ambush, but only Zhao Wujiang knew about it. No one else knew. This. Fenjie was dumbfounded. However, Jiasiluo was only recently transferred to this position. And Zhao Wujiang only appeared because of Duan Wuji. If it was the second possibility, then Zhao Wujiang would have had to have predicted that Jiao Sero would appear when he was dealing with Duan Wuji, and he would have been prepared to deliberately injure himself. But that would be too inconceivable. So I'm leaning toward the first possibility. Don't you see that Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong are also hesitating? Jelifeng said. Fenjie turned his head and saw that Huishu Wuzong had a hint of hesitation on his face. It was clear that he was thinking the same thing. As expected. Fenjie's brow quickly relaxed. Jelifeng's eyes and ears were on all sides. Fenjie's expression had long ago fallen into her eyes, and she inwardly nodded in approval. Fenjie was the crown prince of Mengshi Zhao, and also the son he favored the most. His martial prowess was outstanding, and he had received the orthodox education of the Tang people in the capital of the Tang dynasty. He had met the holy emperor of the Tang dynasty, studied the art of war, and had some understanding of the politics of the court. At his age, there were far too few people who could match him. But the crux of the matter was that he was too young, lacked experience, and lacked tempering. He could see through many things, but he didn't see through them enough. For example, he knew that he couldn't charge in alone and penetrate too deeply into the enemy ranks, but he didn't notice the reactions of the surrounding Tang dynasty soldiers. Given Fenjie's abilities, this shouldn't have been the case. But he was too concerned and confused, lacking a bit of maturity and steadiness. This was the disadvantage of not being old and not having enough experience. That fellow Jiao Sero might really be able to kill Zhao Wujiang. Jelifeng muttered to herself as she gazed up at the mountain. The martial arts of the Great Snow Mountain Temple were completely different from those of the Central Plains, and even more so from those of Mengshi Zhao. Zhao Wujiang might be able to defeat Duan Wuji, but if he ran into the even more formidable Jelifeng, he really might suffer a crushing defeat. But even so, we can't just ignore this matter. Jai, make preparations. If the situation doesn't look good, go and support Jelifeng. Yes, Imperial Father. Fenjie immediately left to carry out the order. Wait a moment. Don't go too quickly, lest Uzin's people become unhappy. Jelifeng said. Uzin's people had acted in order to save Meng Shizhao. If Meng Shizhao's people acted now, it would inevitably cause Uzin's people to feel embarrassed. It would be fine if they helped, but if they didn't, it would instead cause others to feel that they had acted superfluously and would become unhappy. This child understands. Fenjie nodded and left to carry out the order. On the other side, Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong were also conversing in Uzin's language. Fenjie left. Daluan Ruozhen's first words were, "I saw him." Huishu Wuzong nodded, his face expressionless. Their gazes were fixed on the mountain, and they didn't even turn their heads in the direction of Jelifeng and Fenjie, but their movements couldn't be hidden from them. Meng Shizhao's crown prince seems to have a very favorable impression of Jiao Sero. Daluan Ruozhen said. That's normal. Jiao Sero is rough on the outside but delicate on the inside, so it's normal for Fenjie to act this way. Huishu Wuzong indifferently said. If Fenjie could hear their conversation, he would assuredly be shocked. Because the two were clearly talking about him. But we should also make some preparations. If Jelifeng takes action, the Tang dynasty can't just sit back and do nothing. Daluan Ruozhen lightly waved his fan. Understood. I've already made the arrangements. After saying this, both Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong fell silent, no one saying anything else. On the summit, while Daluan Ruozhen, Huishu Wuzong, Jelifeng, Fenjie, and the others were still discussing, the battlefield on the summit was rapidly changing. Jiao Sero and Zhao Wujiang's pursuit had already undergone a drastic change. Bang! Apparently because Jia Siluo had been in too much of a hurry, Zhao Wujiang had stumbled in his panic and almost tripped. This delay had immediately become a fatal opening. A good chance. Jiao Sero's eyes brightened when he saw this scene. How could he let go of such a chance? Boom! Jiao Sero's dantian shook, exploding with an earth-shaking metallic clatter that caused the earth beneath his feet to shake. Borrowing the rebounding force of this stomp, Jiao Sero's speed suddenly skyrocketed. In the blink of an eye, he chased after Zhao Wujiang at the speed of lightning. In midair, he pressed down on Zhao Wujiang's head like a mountain. Ferocious beast stomp. Jiao Sero's entire body's strength condensed into one, emitting an ancient bestial roar in the air. A huge ferocious beast's claw the size of a small mountain appeared in the air and pounced at Zhao Wujiang. Ha ha ha, the 12th. Jiao Sero laughed heartily. Zhao Wujiang at his peak was not his match, not to mention now that he was injured. Ha ha ha, good. Just when Jia Siluo was about to accelerate and catch up, the eyes of Zhao Wujiang, who had been stumbling around in a panic, suddenly shone with a light even more dazzling than the sun. Jiao Sero, you've been tricked. Boom! A blood-red flame rose into the sky. In Jiao Sero's eyes, the injured Zhao Wujiang suddenly turned his palm over and pressed it under his body. In an instant, he and his horse became one. He exerted all his strength and pounced at Jiao Sero in the air at the speed of lightning. Almost at the same time, a few loud bangs came from Jiao Sero's ears. In Jiao Sero's perception, a few unusually powerful figures suddenly appeared among the vast Tang dynasty's soldiers. He did not know how long they had been lurking there. It was only at this moment when he followed Zhao Wujiang into the ambush that they launched the ambush. Jiao Sero, give me your life. Boom, in the deafening roar, a fierce qi soared into the sky. That qi was extremely terrifying. It was so sharp that it seemed to tear the sky apart. Iron Spear Luo. Jiao Sero's heart turned cold. A thought flashed across his mind. In the entire Annam Protectorate, only that iron spear invincible, Luoji, could emit such a terrifying qi. I've been ambushed. Just as this thought flashed across his mind, from all directions, Zhao Wujiang, Luoji, Su Shiping, Su Anduan, as well as Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, Fong Tang, and Zhou Han, the 6 elites of the Black Dragon Gang, attacked at the same time. The 10 of them had surrounded Jia Siluo, cutting off all his paths of retreat. Although Zhao Wujiang and Luoji were the strongest among the 10, the real killer move was not Zhao Wujiang or Luoji. It was Su Shiping, Su Anduan, as well as Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, Fong Tang, and Zhou Han. Looking down from the sky, the 8 people's bodies shone brightly. Everyone's stellar qi seemed to fuse into one, and within the stellar qi, the illusion of a black scythe could be vaguely seen. Chapter 573. There were many joint offensive formations in this world, especially in the military. Be it the Tang dynasty, the Yuzhen, or the Mengshi Zhao, they all had such joint offensive formations, be it in the open or in the dark. By gathering the strength of many weaklings and using the power of the formation, one could challenge or even kill a stronger opponent. However, this kind of joint offensive formation wasn't easy to cultivate. It required great teamwork and teamwork. Thus, up until now, joint offensive formations had only been circulating in a small circle. It was only after the otherworldly invaders appeared that joint offensive formations became widespread. All the martial artists on the continent, be it the Tang dynasty, the Yuzhen, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, or even the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak Spazinu, realized that their attacks weren't very effective against the otherworldly beings. All of the attacks on them or the otherworldly invaders were only half the effect. Thus, everyone had no choice but to think of other methods. It was at that time that small-scale joint offensive formations suddenly became widespread. Be it the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains or the surrounding foreign countries, all of the empires and civilizations focused a large amount of manpower and resources on researching and developing joint offensive formations. A large number of formation combination techniques were invented at that time. Within a short period of time, this kind of small-scale formation combination technique had reached its peak, and the Death's Sickle was one of the most outstanding of them all. Even though time was short, and Su Shiping, Su Anduan, Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, Fong Tang, and Zhou Han hadn't undergone the strict training of Death God yet, the 8 of them were more than enough to deal with a Jiao Sero from the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Boom! Zhao Wujiang and Luoji worked together with Su Shiping, Su Anduan, and the others in their Death God Scythe joint offensive formation. In the blink of an eye, the 10 of them had surrounded the enemy. Even if Jiao Sero was prepared, it was already too late. Ah! The astral wind was strong, and the chi of the 11 people clashed fiercely in the void. With a shrill scream, Jiao Sero's huge Zifidon incarnation was forcefully destroyed. The chi dissipated, and Jiao Sero directly exploded from the form of a Zifidon into his human form. Puff! Blood splattered everywhere, and a dark red spear tip that was dripping with blood pierced into Jiao Sero's chest. The spear missed his heart by a hair's breadth, piercing through his internal organs and coming out from his back. Luoji. Invincible Luoji. In the entire Annam Protectorate, only Luoji Iron Spear could execute such a powerful spear technique that completely ignored Jiao Sero's powerful physical body and astral energy protection. Wang Chang's Wuxia Steel Spear, combined with Luoji Iron Spear's terrifying spear technique, directly pierced through Jiao Sero's Danzhong acupoint, tearing apart his internal organs. What was even more frightening was that Luoji Iron Spear's extremely condensed and powerful astral energy had already entered Jiao Sero's body when the spear pierced through, blasting into his limbs, bones, and meridians. Jiao Sero! General! Waves of roars came from all directions. From afar, the eyes of many Uzun warriors instantly turned red. Suddenly. Too suddenly. Jiao Sero had clearly been the one in pursuit, and he had been incomparably valiant, unstoppable in his path, killing gods and Buddhas alike. And just when it seemed like he was about to take Zhao Wujiang's life, the situation had suddenly reversed. Jiao Sero had gone from being the one in pursuit to the one being chased and ambushed. From the moment he leaped from the ambush to the moment he leaped into the air, before many people could even react, Luoji's invincible spear art had already pierced through Jiao Sero's Danzhong acupoint, killing him in a single blow. At the base of the mountain, the Mengshi, Yusang commanders felt like their hearts were about to stop. An ambush. From start to finish, this had been an ambush. Zhao Wujiang's injury and defeat had all been an act, all for the sake of drawing Jiao Sero into the trap. Damn it! We've been tricked. Daluan Ruozen's pupils contracted, and the fan in his hand suddenly stopped moving. He raised his head and looked at the skinny young figure at the top of the mountain. Although Iron Spear Luo was famous for his spear arts, he was not known for his intelligence. Zhao Wujiang would never have expected that the one to appear after a few rounds of intense battle would be Jiao Sero. From Duan Wuji to Jiao Sero, to calculate from such a long time to Jiao Sero, Daluan Ruozen could only think of one person, that young Tang dynasty youth, Wang Chong. I've been tricked by him. Daluan Ruozen's robes fluttered, and his right hand held onto the feather fan. This was the first time he had lost his balance. In this world, there were very few things that could make him lose his balance, but this was definitely one of them. Daluan Ruozen's loss of balance was definitely not because of Jiao Sero. Jiao Sero was only a trigger. The real reason was that Daluan Ruozen felt that he had met a real opponent. Jiao Sero was sent out by Huishu Wuzong at the last minute. From the White Stone Legion's attack, to Duan Wuji's appearance, and then to Jiao Sero's attack, to be able to think of scheming against Jiao Sero in such a long time span while using Zhao Wujiang, this was definitely not something that an ordinary person could do. Daluan Ruozen did not understand military affairs. But this time, it had nothing to do with military affairs. Daluan Ruozen felt that he had encountered an opponent that was exactly the same as him. Even if the opponent was not at the same level, they were definitely at the same level of intelligence. This brat, I can't let him live any longer. Daluan Ruozen's pupils constricted, and his heart blazed with killing intent. He had originally been thinking that, if possible, he would take this brat's life and seize his knowledge of the art of war. But now, Daluan Ruozen had changed his mind. An opponent of this level could not be allowed to live. He had to be eliminated as quickly as possible. Cack-lack. A series of cracking noises came from the side. Huishu Wuzong remained unmoved, his stalwart body standing like a mountain. But his tightly clenched fists and his ashen face clearly betrayed what he was feeling. Although the offensive power of Jiao Sero's Zifidon was somewhat inferior to that of Longqinba, the leader of the 5 Tiger Generals, its body was tough, its defenses formidable, and its life-preserving methods formidable. Not even Longqinba could compare to it. The Zifidon was a supreme defensive art of the Great Snow Mountain Temple, and Jiao Sero had chosen a completely different path from Longqinba. It was precisely for this reason that neither Daluan Ruozen nor Huishu Wuzong had been very worried when Jiao Sero had pursued Zhao Wujiang. But the scene before him was not what Huishu Wuzong had expected. Order Huoba Guiyuan to prepare to attack. Yes, milord. Putting aside the movements at the base of the mountain, Jiao Sero's situation had left everyone dumbfounded. Ah! As Luoji's spear pierced through Jiao Sero and the group began to plummet, Jiao Sero's right hand grabbed at the spear in his chest, preventing Luoji's spear from piercing any further. Bang! A palm suddenly shot toward Luoji. Bang! As everyone watched, the 2 palms clashed, and Jia Siluo borrowed the rebound force from Luoji's palm to free himself from the spear, leaving a trail of bloody light in his wake as he plummeted downward. Get out of my way! Giaciluo roared and spread out his arms, sending a torrent of stellar energy out in all directions, bringing with it a great spray of blood. Aya! Screams filled the air as a large number of Tang soldiers were sent flying by Jiao Sero. Jiao Sero borrowed the stimulation of pain to increase his speed, carving out a bloody path through the crowd as he rushed down the mountain. Don't let him get away. Behind him, there was a thump as Luoji dropped to the ground, spear in hand, a hint of surprise in his eyes. His Danzhong acupoint had been pierced, and destructive stellar energy had jolted his limbs and bones, but he was still able to escape. This foreign bandit's defense was far more formidable than he had imagined. Bang! Without a word, Luoji's eyes flashed with cold light as he chased after Jiao Sero, his spear in hand. His opponent had already been pierced by his spear, but he was still able to escape. If he really did manage to escape, it would truly be a joke. Hand over your life. Luoji let out a roar, and half of the mountain range trembled under his furious roar. Jiao Sero was on his must-kill list. In this battle, he had killed countless Anan Protectorate soldiers, and Luoji had always wanted to fight him. Alas, Jiao Sero was extremely vigilant and seemed to be consciously avoiding him. Moreover, he had many soldiers at his side most of the time, and he was practically inseparable from the crown prince of Mengshi Zhao, Fenjie. Although Luoji was extremely confident in his spear, he was not confident that he could deal with both Jiao Sero and Fenjie at the same time, much less the many Mengshi Zhao and Yusang experts at their sides. Bang! 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 Luoji's movement technique was pushed to the limit, and he was able to leave behind a few afterimages. After him, Su Shiping, Su Anduan, Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, Fang Tang, and Zhou Han were stunned for a moment before hurriedly giving chase. This battle had gone far more smoothly than they had expected. Although Death's Scythe had been given to them by Wang Chong, there had been too little time for them to test out its power. It was actually able to blow apart Jiao Sero's stellar energy clone. Simply inconceivable. As this thought flashed through Su Anduan's mind, he increased his speed. The closer he got, the more he could sense Jiao Sero's power. This sort of ferocity and brutality was like that of a primordial beast, not something an ordinary person could deal with. Moreover, his stellar energy was extremely robust, far surpassing that of the vast majority of generals. But who would have thought that the attack would actually blow him up in an instant? Young master's calculations are truly inconceivable. A brute like Jiao Sero was completely toyed with by young master. Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, and the others were all invigorated. Zhao Wujiang's feigned defeat had been fooled by almost everyone. Only they knew that this had been a trap from the very start, baiting Jiao Sero into a trap. It was precisely for this reason that they were all filled with admiration for Wang Chong. Chapter 574. Those who stand in my way shall die. Putting aside Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, and the others in the back, Giaciluo was roaring at the front, dragging a bloody path behind him as he charged with all his strength. Impossible! Impossible! My Zifidon Halo is the ultimate technique of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Master said that with my ability, as long as I don't meet Wang Yan or Xian Yuzhongtong, no one can easily threaten me. How could I be defeated so easily? How could there be such a person in the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains? The panic in Jiao Sero's heart was indescribable. Their combined attack had completely shattered his confidence. Right now, the stellar energy in Jiao Sero's body was less than a third of what it used to be, and it was still being depleted at an alarming rate. This was the result of his beast body being destroyed and his stellar energy being destroyed. Combined attack. What kind of combined attack is that? In this battle, only Jiao Sero knew that the one who dealt the fatal blow and destroyed his stellar energy was not Luoji's spear, nor was it Zhao Wujiang's. It was the combined attack of those few people. When Luoji's spear pierced through him, his stellar energy had already been destroyed. The Tang dynasty definitely doesn't have that kind of formation. It must be that brat, it must be that brat. Jiao Sero was shocked and afraid. His entire body was trembling. Almost subconsciously, a figure appeared in his mind. If there was one person who could design that formation, it would undoubtedly be that brat. Jiao Sero had never seen this combined attack formation in the past month in the Tang dynasty. If they had it, they would have used it long ago. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Jiao Sero's entire body was trembling. There was no anger in his heart, only deep fear. He was sure that the reason why Zhao Wujiang had feigned defeat to lure him was definitely that young man's idea. In Jiao Sero's entire life, he had never been so afraid of a youth who was inferior to him. Although the young man's strength was obviously weaker than him, Jiao Sero couldn't bring himself to take revenge at all. He was only left with a deep fear. He wanted to leave this mountain far away from him. From his battle with Fenjie to being ambushed in the rain, to being ambushed by Zhao Wujiang and 10 others. Jiao Sero no longer had any desire to fight in front of this youth. Jiao Sero had experienced such a feeling before. That was when he was the Prime Minister. Boom! A peal of thunder came from the base of the mountain. The neighing of countless horses mixed with the clattering of armor. Jiao Sero could sense that the great general's side had begun to move. A new batch of Uzun cavalry and experts were charging up the mountain, but it was already too late. I have to hurry back to the main army. Only by returning to the Mengshi, Yusang army will I be able to fight for a chance at survival. Jiao Sero's heart was thumping, the thick scent of death wafting from his nose. Never before had Jiao Sero felt so close to death. That sharp aura was like a blade on his back, following him like a shadow. No matter how he ran, he could not shake it off. Hand over your life. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar rang out. After such a long time, Luo Ji had finally caught up from behind. Clang! A dragon's cry resounded through the air. As countless people watched, Luoji stomped his foot, his entire body shooting into the air like a cannonball. The spear in his hand danced to its limit. It was no longer a spear, but a dragon, a flood dragon that had soared into the sky from the depths of a lake. Roar! Luoji's eyes chilled as he leaped into the air. The spear in his hand let out a long cry, transforming into a flood dragon that shot toward Jiao Sero's back. Not good. Jiao Sero was stunned, his soul leaving his body. In the past, he might have been able to block Luoji's spear, but now, his strength was simply not enough. Hong! No one noticed that an Uzun scimitar had come flying out of nowhere and struck Luoji's spear. That spear, imbued with destructive energy, was sent flying. Protect the general. A war horse neighed. An Uzun general with a mustache narrowed his eyes and suddenly became one with his horse. He brushed past Jiao Sero and rushed toward Luoji in the air. Ku Batuo. Jiao Sero's eyelids twitched, and he was stunned. He knew this general, but this general was definitely not under his command. However, Ku Batuo did not understand Jiao Sero. Clang! Before he arrived, he had already slashed his scimitar at Luoji. Presumptuous. Luoji's strength was so strong that even Jiao Sero had to be wary of him, not to mention these Uzun generals. Bang! With just one palm strike, the horse's head was smashed. The tall and sturdy Highland steed, along with the Uzun general, were sent flying by Luoji. However, just as one Uzun general was sent flying, a series of neighs cries could be heard. In an instant, another 7 or 8 Uzun generals on Highland steeds rushed over. These Uzun generals had fierce looks in their eyes. They were brave and aggressive, and there were thorny halos under their feet. They were fighting with their lives on the line. Luoji had blocked 5 or 6 ferocious Uzun generals in a row, but facing so many fearless Uzun generals, even someone like Luoji, who had peerless spear skills, was momentarily held back and could not continue to chase after Jiao Sero. Bang, bang, bang. Luoji wasn't the only one who was held back. These Uzun generals who had appeared out of nowhere rushed over. Su Shiping, Su Anduan, Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Xiong, Li Ji, all the people who were chasing after Jiao Sero were stopped. Damn it! He still managed to escape. On the summit, Chen Shusun was about to stomp his feet and shout. A person like Jiao Sero was an enormous threat on the battlefield. Countless Tang soldiers had already died at his hands. If he still managed to escape after Wang Chong's trap, then it would be even more difficult to kill him in the future. Moreover, even though Luoji's spear had pierced through his chest and severely injured him, he was still unable to move. However, this kind of injury was not enough to kill him. In addition, the Uzun army had quite a few pills from the Great Snow Mountain secret storehouse. As long as Jiao Sero didn't die, he might return to full of vigor and vigor. At that time, given his caution and viciousness, countless people would die at his hands. But this was not the only thing that worried Chen Shusun. While Luoji, Su Shiping, and Su Anduan were being held back by a group of Uzun generals, they heard a scream. This scream did not come from Jiao Sero, but from Zhao Wujiang in the rear. Longkinba. Zhao Wujiang let out a loud cry. Suddenly, he flew high up from the crowd, and like a kite with its string cut, he was flung towards the mountaintop. Bang! The steel vibrated, and Zhao Wujiang's body violently smashed into a thick modular steel wall. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his complexion became much weaker. And across from Zhao Wujiang, a stalwart figure exuding a destructive aura had appeared. His hair was disheveled and he exuded a wild aura. In his hand was a dazzling scarlet scimitar of Uzun. Longkinba. This sudden sight left everyone dumbfounded, and even Luoji paled. In his panic, he was almost struck in the arm by an Uzun general. He recognized this stalwart figure. There was no high-ranking officer of the Annam Protectorate and the Uzun army that did not recognize each other. Longkinba, the leader of the 5 Tiger generals. The strongest general under Wuxia Wuzong's command. This person was even more terrifying than Jiao Sero, and his martial arts far surpassed Jiao Sero's. But this was far from what Luoji was concerned about. Why is he here? Luoji's heart chilled as he suddenly sensed an intense danger. Longkinba was the leader of the 5 Tiger generals, but he had not sensed him at all. Moreover, only a brief moment had passed since Jiao Sero had been ambushed and pursued. Even if the Uzun army wanted to save him, it would have been too late. Unless, Daluan Ruozun. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the same thought flashed through the minds of Luoji and Chen Shusun, 2 people in different parts of the formation. There was only one possibility for Longkinba to appear in such a short time. Before Jiao Sero had been ambushed, he had already stealthily entered the mountain. And only 2 people could have made this sort of arrangement. If it wasn't Daluan Ruozun, it was Wuxia Wuzong. Luoji is in danger. There was no time to think. On the mountain, the upper echelon of the Annam Protectorate roared and neighed as they rode toward Zhao Wujiang. But it was all too late. Jiao Sero was no fool, so in order to lure Jiao Sero out, Zhao Wujiang had truly taken a blow from him. Longkinba had clearly seen this point in his plan to ambush Zhao Wujiang. Now, Jiao Sero was not dead, but Zhao Wujiang was about to die. Bang! Longkinba bent his right foot and stomped on the ground. His entire body was like a taut bow, suddenly released. He lunged straight at Zhao Wujiang, his fierce energy piercing through the air and locking onto Zhao Wujiang. Boom! The steel wall weighing several thousand jin was sent flying by Longkinba, but Zhao Wujiang barely managed to dodge, the attack. Stop him! Hurry and save Lord Zhao. This sudden development took everyone by surprise. At almost the same time, Luoji, Su Shiping, Su Anduan, Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, and the others cast aside Jiao Sero and charged at Longqinba. Jiao Sero had already escaped this calamity, and the other experts of the Mengshi, Yusang army had already gathered around. Continuing to pursue him might not necessarily yield any results, but if Zhao Wujiang was left unattended, he might really end up dead. Longqinba was not an easy character to deal with. Ha ha ha, Prime Minister, Great General. Chapter 575. Prime Minister, I just knew that you wouldn't remain unmoved. Jiao Sero instantly relaxed, the uneasy feeling at his back completely vanishing. Jiao Sero knew that he had escaped a calamity. This time, Jiao Sero did not linger, nor did he think about making a name for himself or going back to work with Longqinba in another battle. His first priority was to preserve his own life. As he charged down the mountain, Jiao Sero failed to notice that a pair of eyes in the air was watching him, but they quickly vanished. Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong, these two pillars of the Uzungari royal lineage truly aren't easy to deal with. In the crowd at the base of the mountain, Jelifeng suddenly gave a long sigh. Even she had been fooled by Longqinba's appearance. It was obvious that Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong had planned this out long ago. The youngest son of the Wang clan had clearly been schemed against by Daluan Ruozhen. The reputation of a wise minister is truly well-deserved. An indifferent voice came from the rear. At this time, only Meng Shi Zhao's great general Duangechuan, who was standing behind Jelifeng, could hear it. His voice was as calm as water, as tranquil as an ancient well. Even Longqinba's appearance had not caused him much of a stir. But not even someone with intelligence could have predicted that Zhao Wujiang would scheme against Jiao Sero. Even without the matter with Jiao Sero, Longqinba would still have found a chance to ambush the Tang people. When Daluan Ruozhen did things, he would never just make preparations. It now seems that the rumors were true. Jelifeng sighed. This time, she was using a sound transmission technique. It was no secret that an expert of this level could control sound waves and conduct it at close range. Obviously, Jelifeng did not want her conversation with Duangechuan to be heard by Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong. Guquan, you have to be especially careful when dealing with people from Uzun, especially Daluan Ruozhen. Jelifeng said. Being allies with them is enough. With the Tang dynasty around, they don't have the time to deal with us. Duangechuan said lightly. The situation on the mountainside had become extremely dangerous. Quick, protect the Lord. The moment Longqinba appeared, all the Tang soldiers in a radius of several hundred zhang began to move, their phalanxes charging at the leader of Uzun's 5 tiger generals. Boom! But before they could get close, a majestic stellar energy exploded from Longqinba's body. Aya! Screams filled the air as the elite soldiers of the Annan Protectorate army were sent flying before they could even get close, their bones broken and their tendons severed as they crashed to the ground, their bodies covered in blood and their fates unknown. Longqinba's attacks were much more powerful than Jiao Sero's, so the Tang dynasty soldiers he had attacked were much more seriously injured than Jiao Sero. Bang! After destroying a phalanx in a single move, Longqinba once more charged at Zhao Wujiang. Stop! Su Shiping anxiously lunged at Longqinba. In the pursuit of Jiao Sero, he had been the last to arrive, so he had been the first to arrive. Zhao Wujiang is heavily injured and definitely won't be able to last for long. He has to be stopped. Su Shiping quietly said to himself. He had never felt so anxious before. Shiping. Careful. Lord Su, careful. Hurry and protect Lord Su. At this moment, cries of alarm came from all around. Su Shiping froze, his mind flabbergasted. Before he could react. Boom! An enormous energy was rapidly approaching. Not good. Before Su Shiping could react, an iron elbow imbued with destructive power slammed into his chest. Su Shiping let out a blood-curdling scream. Half of his chest caved in on the spot, and blood spurted out from his mouth. Die! In the air, Longkinba did not pursue Zhao Wujiang. Instead, he suddenly turned around and struck Su Shiping with his elbow, sending him flying. Catch milord! Everyone paled in fright as the Anam Protectorate soldiers rushed forward to catch Su Shiping. In the air, Luoji, his eyes red, also charged forward. Stop! Raising his spear, Luoji leaped forward to block Longkinba's saber strike at Su Onduan. Dang! As the saber and spear clashed, Luoji's hand went numb and he was forced back 7 or 8 steps. Meanwhile, Longkinba stood like a mountain, sneering at Luoji. Oh no! At that moment, Luoji's heart was incomparably heavy. Longkinba's attacks were even sharper and fiercer, his strength firmly suppressing him. But this was not what Luoji was most worried about. Young master's formation has been broken by him, a thought flashed through Luoji's mind. Longkinba was much more crafty and difficult to deal with than Jiao Sero. On the surface, he pretended to deal with Zhao Wujiang, but in reality, he had seriously injured Su Shiping with a single move. As soon as Su Shiping was seriously injured, the 8 people's joint attack formation immediately collapsed. And without young master's formation, the scythe of the death god, everyone present, including himself, would find it very difficult to deal with the leader of Uzun's 5 tiger generals. Humph! Like a demon god, Longkinba stared at Luoji and Luo Tietjiang in the crowd and sneered, making no attempt to conceal the contempt in his eyes. Then, his body swayed as he ignored Luoji and began to charge up the mountain. Not good. Luoji's expression tensed as he immediately began to pursue Longkinba. General, I'll help you. At the same time, Su Onduan, Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, and Li Ji also arrived, the 9 of them working together to attack Longkinba. There were 2 sides to the story, each expressing its own opinion. While Longkinba was pursuing Zhao Wujiang on the summit, on the other side, Jiao Sero was about to reach his warhorse. His body was bleeding profusely, and his injuries were worsening. Luoji's domineering stellar energy was bursting into his limbs and bones. But Jiao Sero was not very worried. The Prime Minister had an extremely close relationship with the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Moreover, he had many of the secret medicines of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Just one would be enough to stop his injuries and greatly alleviate his internal injuries. In just a few days, he would be able to recover 50 to 60% of his strength and enter the battlefield once more. And if he could ask nicely and have the Prime Minister bestow him that divine medicine, he would probably be as lively as a dragon or a tiger in no time. The Great Snow Mountain Temple had an ancient heritage that even surpassed the Uzun Empire. The power of some of the top-class medicines there far surpassed the imagination of outsiders. Buzz! Just when Jiao Sero was only a few zhang away from his warhorse, a figure suddenly flashed by. A fully armored Mengshi Zhao soldier had seemingly inadvertently blocked his path. Get out of my way! Jiao Sero extended his right hand, impatiently trying to push aside the Mengshi Zhao soldier. But just when Jiao Sero was about to move, the Mengshi Zhao soldier seemed to move, raising his head to glance at Jiao Sero. At that moment, Jiao Sero suddenly saw a piercing cold light in the soldier's eyes. His 2 hands paused in the air, and Jiao Sero felt a chill in his heart as he suddenly had an extremely ill foreboding. Ah! Halfway up the mountain, while Longkinba was pursuing Zhao Wujiang and single-handedly blocking Su Onduan, Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, and the rest of the Annan Protectorate army, no one was a match for him. He had attracted everyone's attention and had even torn apart the Annan Protectorate army's defense line. Suddenly, a scream rang out. This was a heartrending scream that made everyone jump in fright. This was not a scream that a normal person could make. Only a person on the verge of death could make. Jiao Sero! At the base of the mountain, in the middle of the horsemen, Dalawan Ruozan paled and turned his head in the direction of the voice. He recognized this voice. It was Jiao Sero's voice. But hadn't he already dispatched Longkinba to save him? And hadn't he already returned to the Mengshi Yusang army? Why was he still screaming like this? At this moment, Dalawan Ruozan suddenly had an extremely ill foreboding. Jiao Sero is finished. At almost the same time, in the Mengshi Zhao camp, Zhelyuofeng's strongest subordinate, Great General Duan Gechuan, spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. Let's go. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Finally, everyone noticed where the voice was coming from. At the border between Mengshi Zhao and Uzan, a young, Mengshi Zhao soldier, had thrust his spear through Jiao Sero's heart, and then hung his stalwart body on the spear and raised it high into the air. The Ziffidan Jiao Sero, who had once rampaged through the southwestern battlefield of the Tang dynasty and killed many Tang soldiers, was now like a lifeless rag sack hanging from the tip of the spear of that Mengshi Zhao soldier, his arms and legs dangling down, swaying in the wind. Killed. Jiao Sero had been killed. And he had been killed by a Mengshi Zhao soldier, closest to his highland steed. But even so, everyone knew that this was no Mengshi Zhao soldier. Wang Chong. For no reason at all, when he saw that slender figure and that savage and tyrannical aura, Dalawan Ruozan suddenly thought of a single person. To be able to calculate Jiao Sero's escape route in this complicated battlefield and successfully kill him at the last moment, Dalawan Ruozan could only think of one person, Wang Chong. That youth of the Tang dynasty who had caused so much trouble for the Mengshi Yusang army. Swish. A dark red sword stabbed into Jiao Sero's body, sucking away every last drop of stellar energy in Jiao Sero's body. The strength of that Mengshi Zhao soldier swelled, his aura constantly rising. Ha! With a shake of his spear, Jiao Sero's body was thrown several zhang away like a piece of trash. Taking advantage of the stunned Mengshi Yusang soldier's lack of time to react, that Mengshi Zhao soldier immediately charged toward the summit. Capture him. Spy. He's one of the Tang people. Don't let him get away. Furious roars resounded through the heavens as all the soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army roared in their own languages as they pursued that Mengshi Zhao soldier. The Mengshi Zhao soldiers in particular were so angry that their faces were green. A valiant general of the Uzan had actually been killed by a Mengshi Zhao soldier. If the Uzan army were to misunderstand, it would pose an enormous threat to Mengshi Zhao. More importantly. Chapter 576. Jiao Sero is dead. Duan Wuxia is wounded. All generals, hear my order. Ignore Longkinba. Attack with all your strength and destroy the Mengshi Yusang army. As the Tang soldiers were pursuing that Mengshi Zhao soldier, a thunderous voice exploded in the air, echoing in all directions. Everyone was extremely familiar with this voice. It was none other than Wang Chong's voice. If the Mengshi Yusang army had been unmoved the first time, then when Wang Chong spoke in the language of Uzan and Mengshi Zhao a second time, everything changed. Bang! There was a massive boom, and after a brief silence, the entire Great Tang army began to undergo a complete transformation. All the Tang dynasty phalanxes suddenly abandoned Longkinba, acting as if the leader of the 5 tiger generals, Uzan, did not exist at all. They suddenly turned and charged down the mountain. Kaiyil. At the same time, the tens of thousands of soldiers of the Annan Protectorate army that had been waiting for orders halfway up the mountain suddenly began to roar and charge down the mountain like a tide. When Jiao Sero led the Uzan army out, when Longkinba appeared on the mountain, the nature of the battle changed. This was no longer a probing attack, but a true battle. Buzz! The soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army that had been pursuing Wang Chong finally began to show signs of fear. Even some of the fiercest soldiers showed fear in their eyes when they saw the fresh army of the Tang dynasty charging down the mountain like a flood of steel. That voice had been completely correct. Duan Wuji had been heavily injured and had left, Jiao Sero had been killed, and the only person who could still fight and command, Long Qinba, was still on the mountain ambushing Zhao Wujiang. The White Stone Legion and the Yuzhen army were truly leaderless. No matter what Long Qinba's initial plan was, when he began to infiltrate the Tang army and pursue Zhao Wujiang, he had already left his army. Long Qinba's existence was practically non-existent. Damn it! In the roiling tide of people, Long Qinba's body was like that of a behemoth, his tyrannical aura intimidating. But at this moment, when he saw that flood of steel howling down the mountain, Long Qinba couldn't help but grimace, a hint of apprehension appearing in his heart. Even ants could bite an elephant to death. Given the current situation, no matter how strong he was, if he could not retreat in time, once he went too deep, it would be too late for him to retreat when people at the level of Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong appeared. Although Wang Chong had said that he was ignoring him, this made Long Qinba even more apprehensive. Humph! No matter what, let's kill Zhao Wujiang first. Long Qinba's expression hardened as he finally made his decision. No matter what decision the Tang dynasty made, he had to kill Zhao Wujiang first. Jiao Sero was dead, and Zhao Wujiang had to die as well. Moreover, he was heavily injured and not far from death. Buzz! Long Qinba brought his palms together. Clang clang clang. There was a shrill clattering of metal, like the turning of gears. Behind Long Qinba, a massive 10-armed Bodhi tree appeared. The 10 sword-like dark golden arms spread open like a dark golden sun, blooming in the void. At the same time, a series of grinding sounds came from under Long Qinba's feet. Supported by the light of the black thorn, Long Qinba seemed like a demon god. Boom! Long Qinba's body swayed, and then a black storm swept through the area. Boom boom boom! Fierce winds swept through the area, sending Luoji, Su Anduin, the other core members of the Black Dragon Bandit, and even the surrounding warriors of the Anan Protectorate of the Tang dynasty were all sent flying. Long Qinba's strength had already reached a level that would make anyone pale in shock. Clang! A cold light flashed through the air as Long Qinba leaped forward, his Uzun scimitar leaving a long scar in the air as he slashed at Zhao Wujiang Tensum Zhang away. This scimitar was swift and fierce, and the moment it appeared, it stirred up a fierce gale that seemed capable of tearing apart the sky. After suffering Long Qinba's sneak attack and the injuries he had suffered while fighting Jia Siluo, Zhao Wujiang had already exhausted all of his stellar energy and was powerless to dodge. Just as Zhao Wujiang was about to die to Long Qinba's scimitar, boom! There was a flash of light as a sword filled with stellar energy collided with Long Qinba's scimitar. The enormous energy sent both man and sword flying back, but Long Qinba's surekill strike had also been deflected off course. Thump thump thump. A muscular Anan Protectorate general was forced to take several steps back, the blood in his chest in turmoil. It was clear that he had suffered quite a bit. Lin Wuxiu. Luoji softly called out, a look of pleasant surprise on his face as he, Su Anduin, and the other core members of the Black Dragon Bandit charged forward. He stood shoulder to shoulder with the high-ranking Anan Protectorate general called Lin Wuxiu, blocking Long Qinba's path. Humph, it's useless. None of you can stop me. Long Qinba's eyes flashed with a savage light as majestic stellar energy surged through his body like a storm. He didn't have much time left, but it was enough for him to kill a few people. Luoji, Su Anduin, Zhang Hu, attack his right ribs together. Lin Wuxiu, Sword of Annihilation, move the Baihui above your head 2 inches to the left. Just when Long Qinba was preparing to go on a killing spree, he suddenly heard a voice. Boom! Before anyone else could react, Luoji was the first to react. Boom! In a flash of light, a halo appeared under Luoji's feet, and he instantly became one with his spear. The thick silver spear in his hand shot through the air and stabbed at Long Qinba's ribs. Lin Wuxiu also reacted. Boom! A ray of light stabbed at Long Qinba's head. Milord! Young master! The last to react were Su Shiping, Zhang Hu, and the other core members of the Black Dragon Bandit, finally recognizing Wang Chang's voice. Clang clang clang. The 7 of them shot forward, their Wuxia steel weapons stabbing at the muscular Longkinba. After the 7, the last to act was Wang Chong. Clang! A ray of light zigzagged through the crowd, and before anyone could react, Wang Chong had become one with his sword and used his strongest technique. Leaping Dragon Art. A massive flood dragon flew through the air like a bolt of lightning. When it reached a certain height, it suddenly shot down like a bolt of lightning, slamming into Longkinba's head. Boom! There was a heaven-shaking boom as Luoji's spear, Lin Wuxiao's sword, Wang Chang's leaping dragon art, and the attacks of Su Onduan and the others were all blocked by an invisible barrier. In a flash, a majestic and firm wall of stellar energy expanded from Longkinba's body. Hiss! Gasps could be heard, and all the Annam Protectorate warriors who saw this sight felt a chill run down their backs. Longkinba's stellar energy had reached an inconceivable level. Although he didn't have a tough avatar like the Ziffadan Jiao Sero, he was able to rely on his thick stellar energy to achieve a similar effect. Swish! While everyone was stunned by Longkinba's powerful stellar energy, there was a flash of bloody light. Without the slightest warning, a sword chi pierced through Longkinba's stellar energy, heading straight for his head. In a flash, Longkinba's head tilted to the side, narrowly avoiding this fatal blow. The sword chi struck his back, and with a swish, a bloody wound appeared on his back, blood gushing out. Stellar Energy Piercer. Wang Chang's attack had actually triggered the rare effect of Stellar Energy Piercer. What sort of martial art is this? Longkinba roared. Even with his usual composure, he couldn't help but pale at this moment. Even though he had come from the Great Snow Mountain Temple and had seen many martial arts, he had never seen anything like this. His stellar energy had clearly blocked Wang Chang's attack, but that sword chi had inexplicably pierced through it. Not even Luoji had been able to do this, but the unworthy Wang Chong had. If he hadn't reacted so quickly just now, Wang Chang's stellar energy would have pierced his head. Bzzz. Wang Chong didn't answer. His left hand suddenly reached for his waist, pulled out a sword, and thrust it at Longkinba. The more times the stellar energy piercer was attacked, the more times it would trigger. Although there was no way to determine the effect, there was one thing that could be confirmed. As long as one attacked 4 times, the stellar energy piercer would definitely trigger once. This was the best way to deal with a martial artist with thick stellar energy like Longkinba. It was also the only way Wang Chong could threaten him. But this time, before Wang Chong could strike, Longkinba pushed out his arms, unleashing a fierce and tyrannical wave of stellar energy that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Boom! The air exploded with a heaven-shaking boom. Wang Chong, Luoji, Lin Wuxiao, Su Onduan, everyone was sent flying. Longkinba's strength had reached an inconceivable level. But this time, there was no joy on Longkinba's face, much less any of his previous composure. Damn it, this brat's skill in the art of war is one thing, but just where did he learn this bizarre technique? Longkinba stood like an iron tower on the slope, his frightening eyes fixed on Wang Chong, making no attempt to conceal the killing intent in them. With Wang Chong's participation, this battle had suddenly become extremely disadvantageous to him. It wasn't just because of Wang Chong's bizarre and indefensible stellar energy piercer. More importantly, all of the places that Wang Chong had pointed out were weak points that he had yet to master. The martial arts of the Great Snow Mountain Temple were famed for their formidable prowess, but they were also famed for their difficulty in cultivating them. Longkinba had cultivated for 10-some years and had long ago reached the level of major success, but he was clearly still some distance away from the level of perfection. And below his ribs and at the top of his head were precisely the weak points that he had yet to master. Anyone else would have been fine, but Wang Chong had even pointed out 2 inches to the left of the baihui above his head. Longkinba couldn't help but feel apprehensive. Because that was where his fatal weakness lay. In a flash, Longkinba's heart seethed with killing intent. But Wang Chong had apparently anticipated this move. He was standing behind Luoji and Lin Wuxiu, making it impossible for Longkinba to strike even if he wanted to. Longkinba, retreat. All of a sudden, a thunderous voice rang out. At the base of the mountain, Huishu Huizang, who had been standing like an immovable mountain this entire time, suddenly stepped forward and gave an order in Tibetan. Buzz! This order was so sudden that let alone Longkinba, even Wang Chong was shocked. Chapter 577. What a pity! Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh as he watched Longkinba suddenly charge down the mountain. That's right. Truly a pity. If he had waited just a little longer, Longkinba wouldn't have been able to escape. Although he didn't react in time, Huishu Wuzong reacted. Luoji added. What a pity for this chance. A voice came from nearby. In the rear of the army, 50-some zhang from Wang Chong's group, one figure after another slowly walked out. Now that Longkinba had left, these people no longer needed to conceal their auras. Storm after storm of energy began to rise from their bodies. All of them had an aura that was not one bit inferior to that of Luoji or Lin Wuxiu. It was obvious that these people were the highest-ranking generals of the Annam Protectorate. The Annam Protectorate didn't have many other things, but it had the most high-ranking generals. If Longkinba had reacted just a little later, the 10-some generals working together with Wang Chong, Luoji, and the thousands of Annam Protectorate elites around them would have been more than enough to keep Longkinba here. Kaiyil. Only after escaping from the battle and hearing the roars of fighting did they realize the thick aura of the battlefield. Without Duan Wuji, without Jiao Sero, and even with Longkinba's retreat, the remaining White Stone Legion Uzan cavalry could no longer hold against the charge of the Annam Protectorate and began to retreat down the mountain like the receding tide. Young master, what do we do now? Everyone turned to Wang Chong. If Huishu Wuzong wants to retreat, do you think he can retreat without leaving something behind? Wang Chong, still wearing the armor of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers, sneered as he looked down the mountain. In the previous defeat, the Mengshi, Yusang army had been so densely packed that they had reached the midpoint of the mountain. On the surface of the mountain were 80 to 90,000 Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. Wang Chong's initial strategic goal had been achieved. At a time like this, Huishu Wuzong would be underestimating him if he wanted his army to retreat easily. Activate the plan. Generals, return to your positions and begin the harvest. Yes, young master, not everyone had complete trust in Wang Chong. One by one, they turned around and left. Even Luoji had left. At least Zhao Wujiang and Su Shiping, who were seriously injured, would be taken care of. Shouts and shouts could be heard from the base of the slope. The Tang dynasty soldiers charging down from the summit had already delayed a large number of Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. Almost there. Wang Chong smiled coldly, and then began the most important scene of this battle. Bang! Wang Chong raised his right foot high and then stomped it down. Rumble! The entire world fell silent, and even time seemed to stop. As Wang Chong's right foot descended, ripples began to spread out from Wang Chong's foot. Wherever these ripples passed, the Tang dynasty soldiers showed no reaction. However, 100 zhang from Wang Chong, a Mengshi Zhao soldier's foot flashed, and a milky white halo suddenly appeared. Then a second, a third, a fourth. In the end, the halo spread from the entire White Stone Legion to all the Uzan soldiers on the mountain. Without any warning, all the Mengshi, Yusang soldiers on the surface of the mountain suddenly dropped in strength, their cultivation dropping by several levels. What's going on here? Everyone paled in fright. The Mengshi, Yusang soldiers had originally been around the same level as the Annam Protectorate soldiers, but now, their strength had dropped by several levels. Their strength, speed, and dexterity were all reduced, and even their speed of escape was clearly reduced. No one had expected this. On the other side, all the Tang dynasty soldiers of the Annam Protectorate were invigorated. As mortal enemies of the southwest, the Mengshi Zhao soldiers and the Uzun soldiers were all too familiar with each other. The change in the Mengshi, Yusang army was immediately sensed by the Annam Protectorate of the Tang dynasty. Kaiyil! Kaiyil! A heaven-shaking war cry resounded through the sky. All the Annam Protectorate soldiers were invigorated and began to madly attack. Bang bang bang! One after another, Mengshi Zhao and Uzun soldiers fell. These opponents who had been like gods of slaughter suddenly became incredibly weak. Their defeat and the massive drop in strength meant that in just a few moments, the Mengshi, Yusang army had lost nearly 10,000 soldiers. Run! Panic spread through the Mengshi, Yusang army like a plague. Even the valiant Uzun cavalry began to panic. Kill! The Mengshi, Yusang army fled in a frenzy while the Annam Protectorate soldiers pursued from behind. Corpses piled up on the ground, blood gushing out like rivers. There was no need for Wang Chong to direct or push the army. Daluan Ruozan, let's see what you do next. With a cold smile, Wang Chong turned his back and began to stride toward the summit. At his side, the fully armored Tang soldiers surged forward like a tide, but when these soldiers got close to Wang Chong, they would automatically move to the sides. Young master. On the summit, Chen Shusun was completely convinced and respectfully bowed. This attitude was even more respectful than when he was facing Xian Yuzhongtong or Wang Yan. In this aspect, Chen Shusun was completely subservient to Wang Chong. Daluan Ruozan had arranged for Long Qinzan to infiltrate the army in order to gain the upper hand by a show of strength and kill the great Tang commanders, but in the end, he had failed by a single move. Not only had his plan been foiled, he had even lost Jia Siluo. Jiao Sero had escaped calamity after calamity, finally retreating to the ranks of the Mengshi, Yusang army. He was only several zhang away from his mount, but in the end, he had still fallen in front of Wang Chong. From start to finish, he had never been able to escape Wang Chong's schemes. This valiant Uzun general who had killed countless Tang dynasty soldiers since the War of the Southwest had ultimately fallen to Wang Chong. If Wang Chong had not killed him, who knew how many more people would have died at his hands? There's no need for such courtesy. Wang Chong waved his hand, taking off the Mengshi Zhao helmet from his head and tossing it to the side. In the battle with Fenjie, he had obtained several pieces of Mengshi Zhao armor, and now they were finally put to use. In the war between the Tang dynasty and Mengshi Zhao had disguised themselves as Tang people many times to gather information, spy, and even assassinate. Mengshi Zhao knew how to use this tactic, and Wang Chong was simply giving them a taste of their own medicine. After taking off the Mengshi Zhao armor, Wang Chong extended his right hand to the banner on the summit, to the other Wang Chong standing motionless on the banner. Young master, this subordinate has succeeded. The guard pretending to be Wang Chong lowered his head, took off his helmet, and respectfully placed it in Wang Chong's hand. Although Wang Chong was very young, no one in the army dared to look down on him because of this. General Chen, are you ready for what's coming next? The Mengshi, Yusang army has suffered a loss and definitely won't let the matter rest. This war is far from over. Wang Chong took the armor from the thin guard's hands and slowly put it on. As he spoke, his gaze swept over the nearby summit, where the brave and skilled elites of the Tang dynasty were still standing like a forest of spears, motionless. These 40,000 soldiers were Wang Chong's final trump card, his final reliance. Now was not yet the time to use them. Young master, be at ease. Everything has been ordered. Chen Shusun sternly said. He was currently treating Wang Chong like a god. No matter what order Wang Chong gave him, even if he was told to jump off a cliff, Chen Shusun would do it without hesitation. Wang Chong only smiled and gave a slight nod of his head, saying no more. Daluan Ruozan, it's your turn. Zhao Wujiang and Jiao Sero had only been the first clash between Wang Chong and Daluan Ruozan, the intelligent Uzun. This was only the second. Wang Chong was well aware that he had completely attracted the attention of this Uzun prime minister of the Ngari royal lineage. Longkinba's appearance was the best proof of this. I'm truly looking forward to it. Daluan Ruozan, with me here, you will never succeed. Wang Chong once more stood on the summit, gazing at that figure at the base of the mountain, wearing a wide-sleeved robe and a feather fan. Even to great generals of the Central Plains like Geshu Han and Fomenlinta, Daluan Ruozan was an extremely difficult existence to deal with. In the War of the Southwest, it was said that Uzun had moved south at the request of the king of Mengshi Zhao, Jelifeng. But to Wang Chong, even without Jelifeng's request, Uzun would still have moved south. The more than 200,000 cavalry had left the plateau and descended had all been orchestrated by Daluan Ruozan. Huishu Wuzong was nothing more than a sharp blade in his hands. The southwest was far from his goal. Unlike Jelifeng, Daluan Ruozan's ambitions were far greater, and what he wanted was far from what Jelifeng could give him. If no one came to stop him, Daluan Ruozan would become a mortal malady for the Tang dynasty. So, come. This will be your final stop, Daluan Ruozan. Wang Chong's robes flapped in the wind as he stared at that figure down the mountain, his eyes shining with a scorching light. Meanwhile, at the base of the mountain, Daluan Ruozan stood in the midst of the fierce winds, every strand of his hair blown about in the wind. At this moment, Daluan Ruozan was as restless as the turbulent winds. On the summit, large swathes of the Mengshi, Yusang army were toppling like weeds, their corpses rolling down the mountain. This sight left everyone deeply stunned. At this moment, the 500,000 soldiers of the army could clearly sense the strength of the 100,000 soldiers on the summit. But it was different for Daluan Ruozan. Daluan Ruozan could sense a wordless challenge in the air. He's challenging me. As Daluan Ruozan gazed at that figure on the summit, his expression slowly turned grave. No one had ever dared to use this sort of method to challenge him on this battlefield. Not even Zhangzhou Jianxiong had done this. But this youth from the capital of the Tang dynasty had done it. Jiao Sero's death was not an isolated incident. This was a silent declaration and challenge. Chapter 578. All soldiers, hear my order. Prepare to attack. On the mountain, both the White Stone Legion and the Uzun cavalry were being routed. At this time, even a fierce general like Longkinba was powerless. As countless soldiers of the coalition army were being cut down like weeds, Huishu Wuzong finally gave the order. Wait a moment. Daluan Ruozan suddenly came to his senses and called out to Huishu Wuzong. There's no need to send any more soldiers. There's no meaning in sending any more soldiers. Didn't we get a batch of celestial wolf bows from the Western Turks not long ago? Prime Minister means, Huishu Wuzong suddenly understood Daluan Ruozan's meaning. It's about time to use those celestial wolf bows. Have them enter the field. Daluan Ruozan said. This time, Huishu Wuzong did not object. Although Daluan Ruozan, as a civil minister, was somewhat overstepping his bounds by intervening in the war, Huishu Wuzong was well aware that this person had never been a purely civil minister. Even the military books of the Central Plains that Wang Chong had been obtained by him. Daluan Ruozan's method might not have been suitable at other times, but it was completely appropriate at this moment. It was just that his methods were a little cruel. Didn't you hear? Celestial Wolf Cavalry, hear my order. Prepare to fall into line. Huishu Wuzong's eyes flashed as he quickly made his decision. Galloping galloped through the air, stirring up a cloud of dust. A few moments later, a fully armored Uzun cavalry galloped out from the vast army. Unlike the other Uzun cavalry, each member of this army carried a massive celestial wolf bow on their back. These celestial wolf bows were made from high-quality nanmu, each of them 4 to 5 feet long and more than half their height. The gray wolf skin used to wrap the bow clearly indicated the bow's identity. Only the Western Turks, who occupied the steppe and desert lands of the northwest of the Tang dynasty, would use this bow. Although the Western Turks were far inferior to the Tang dynasty in smelting metals and forging weapons, and they had always been lacking in metals, they were far superior to the Tang dynasty when it came to the creation of bows. Even though the bows of the Western Turks were far inferior to the ballistae of the Tang dynasty and did not have the technology to use them, they still possessed a power beyond the ballistae. And even better than ballistae, they were much easier to make. Get ready. With a high-pitched sound and a creaking sound, the serious bows were pulled taut to the extreme. Countless arrows were as dense as a forest, and all of them were aimed in the direction of the mountain peak. Release. Pang! Pang! With a series of deafening explosions, tens of thousands of arrows streaked across the sky like rain. After drawing arcs in the air, they fell toward the battlefield on the surface of the mountain. Ah! Ah! Suddenly, there was a scream. A Mengshi Zhao soldier had barely taken 2 steps when he was struck dead by a sharp arrow. The arrow had pierced through his throat, pierced through his collarbone, and struck his organs. The Mengshi Zhao soldier only had time to take 2 steps before he fell to his knees, soaking in his own blood. And this was like a signal, swish swish swish. Right after this arrow, thousands upon thousands of sharp arrows, flickering with cold light, covered the sky and covered the earth. They were as dense as rain, shooting down from the sky. Mengshi Zhao's men, Uzun's men, Tang dynasty's men. Huishu Wuzong's assault had encompassed everyone. The area where Mengshi Zhao's, the Tang dynasties, and the Uzun's entanglement formed a rain of arrows. Regardless of friend or foe, regardless of who was the target, everyone within this range was the target of the attack. Ah! Screams resounded over the mountain as countless Mengshi Zhao's, Uzun's, and Tang peoples fell to this sudden volley of arrows. Enemy attack. Careful. When they realized that the arrows were not coming from the Tang dynasty, but their own camp, all the Mengshi Zhao soldiers who were still entangled were dumbfounded. Shooting at the Tang dynasty's Annam Protectorate soldiers was understandable, but why were they also being targeted? What's going on here? Soldiers and servants collapsed to the ground, their eyes wide open. It's the Turk celestial wolf bows and celestial wolf arrows. Careful. Dodge. On the mountain, all the Annam Protectorate soldiers dodged the attacks of the Uzun celestial wolf bows. The attacks behind them also came to a halt. Your Majesty, what are the Uzuns doing? Have they gone mad? Why are they attacking their own people? Damn it, these madmen. Seeing the White Stone Legion soldiers falling to their own arrows, the eyes of the Mengshi Zhao generals turned red. The White Stone Legion soldiers had been the main force in this attack. The Uzun soldiers on the summit had only brought 10,000 some soldiers at most. The majority of those killed in this attack were Mengshi Zhao's. Moreover, the Uzun soldiers wore plate armor, the strongest in the region. Not even the armor of the Tang dynasty's Annam Protectorate could compare, much less the soldiers of Mengshi Zhao. The Uzun soldiers had always been few in numbers, and with the addition of plate armor, the casualties were even lower. Your Majesty, allow me to take some men to negotiate with the Uzun. Otherwise, I can take the army to rescue my brothers. The Mengshi Zhao generals were extremely excited to see the casualties on the mountain. There's no need. Jelifeng waved her sleeves, her expression extremely cold. With the White Stone Legion in such a state, it doesn't matter whether we send troops or not. The Uzun's method is the best one. Only with this method will we have the least casualties. Otherwise, the White Stone Legion will really be wiped out. Ah! The group of generals opened their mouths in shock. Your Majesty is right. This is indeed the best way now. A cold voice suddenly came from behind. Hearing this voice, the generals fell silent. It was fine if His Majesty said so, but even the great general said so, which meant that it was probably true. Jelifeng is indeed a good partner. On the other side, Daluan Ruozan saw that the Mengshi Zhao generals had calmed down very quickly. He smiled and nodded. Although Jelifeng was ambitious, she had the vision of an ambitious person and could see the essence of the problem at a glance. There were many things that didn't need to be said too much. As a partner and ally, Jelifeng was indeed very suitable. Get ready. The probing is over. Next, it's time for the real battle. As Daluan Ruozhen spoke, he slowly turned his head to look at Wuxia Wuzong. As the saying went, benevolence does not command wealth, and compassion does not command troops. A general needed a cold heart and always put the bigger picture above all else. Although the battle on the mountain peak seemed unusually intense, for Daluan Ruozhen and Wuxia Wuzong, it was far from the beginning. This was all just the foreplay. After saying this, Daluan Ruozhen quickly turned around and walked back. Just as he turned around, a loud and clear voice came from the peak of the mountain far behind him. Ready, fire! Daluan Ruozhen fiercely turned around, just in time to see a volley of arrows descending like locusts. But this time, it was not a dense volley of arrows, nor did it come from the Yuzhan army. Rather, it came from the Annam Protectorate on the mountain peak. Ah! Screams filled the air as the Mengshi, Yusang army collapsed at the base of the mountain. Daluan Ruozhen froze for a moment, and then he glanced at that thin figure on the summit, a hint of surprise in his eyes. But he quickly grinned, waved his sleeve, and vanished into the army. Congratulations to User. You have killed 7,780 Yuzhan soldiers. Congratulations to User. You have killed 69,861 Mengshi Zhao soldiers. On the summit, a string of voices howled out of Wang Chang's mind. As he gazed at the Mengshi, Yusang army at the base of the mountain, a faint smile slowly appeared on Wang Chang's lips. Chapter 579. Young Master, we've won. On the mountain, Chen Shusun was overjoyed at the sight of the tens of thousands of Mengshi, Yusang soldiers fleeing in disarray. This was no small battle. Now that the Mengshi, Yusang army had retreated, the mountains and plains were covered in corpses, their bodies piled high like a sea. The war banners of the White Stone Legion were strewn across the battlefield, their corpses sticking out of the ground. This cruel scene was the best symbol of the Tang dynasty's victory. 100,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers against 110,000 Mengshi, Yusang soldiers, 40,000 of whom were stationed on the summit and had not taken part in the battle. But in the end, 70,000 soldiers died, nearly 80,000 soldiers of the Mengshi, Yusang army. On the Arai plains, the White Stone Legion that had once caused the Annam Protectorate a great deal of trouble and killed many Tang soldiers was almost crippled. Even Duan Wuji had been heavily injured. To the soldiers of the Annam Protectorate, this was an unimaginable victory. And in this battle, the Tang dynasty had lost less than 10,000 soldiers. This was simply unimaginable to those who had experienced the cruel battles on the shores of the Arai. On the summit, the eyes of the guards flashed, their gazes on Wang Chong brimming with respect, even worship. Although Wang Chong was only a teenager and his figure was extremely thin, in the eyes of the crowd, the voice of the youth before them seemed to be unprecedentedly majestic, as if it was a heavy mountain. Reporting. The old general has sent word. On the battlefield, one must not be arrogant and conceited. He hopes that Milord can guard against arrogance and continue to maintain it. Reporting. Lord Protector General, a message has been sent. Young Master's achievements are obvious to all. This seat will report everything that happened today to the Imperial Court and recommend Young Master. 2 messengers with banners on their backs appeared on the summit one after the other, passing on the will of the 2 highest commanders of the Southwest Army. Hearing these words, Wang Chong subconsciously turned around and looked at the dense and motionless army not far away from the mountain peak. Although the summit was crowded with soldiers, Wang Chong was still able to recognize the backs of his father and Annam Protector General Xian Yuzhongtong at a glance. The 2 of them, one on the east and one on the west, faced each other with their backs to him. Although he couldn't see their expressions and they hadn't even glanced in his direction, Wang Chong could sense that their gazes had always been focused on him. "Father." Wang Chong looked at his father's tall and sturdy back that was as heavy as a cliff, and his heart was filled with warmth. His father rarely praised him, and it was not in his nature to say such things. There wasn't a hint of praise in the words the orderly conveyed to him, but Wang Chong knew very well that given his father's personality, it was already a great compliment. There was no doubt that his father had also seen his own merits. In those few words, Wang Chong could sense his father's deep support. "Young master, look. What's that?" Suddenly, a startled voice interrupted Wang Chong's thoughts. Ah Zhong turned his head, but before he could clearly see what was going on, Ah Zhong could hear the rumbling of thousands of people shouting at the same time. From his vantage point on the summit, he could see countless porters, peasants, and laborers busying about in the Mengshi, Yusang army. "It's Mengshi Zhao's people." This thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind. Uzan was a long distance away, and the people of Uzan made a living as herders. If they wanted porters, peasants, and laborers, they could only recruit Mengshi Zhao's people. "Milord, what are they doing?" On the summit, Luoji and the Black Dragon bandit members walked up, their eyes filled with confusion as they looked down the mountain. Because of the distance and the cover of the army, even from the summit, they couldn't see what was happening clearly. Wang Chong said nothing, countless thoughts flitting through his mind as he stared at the distant shouts. "It's a siege weapon." Suddenly, as he saw half a piece of wood flash by, Wang Chong suddenly realized something. "What?" Chen Shusan's expression flickered at Wang Chong's words. "Siege weapons? Wasn't that what the Mengshi, Yusang army had used in Lion City?" But siege weapons were large and cumbersome, making them extremely inconvenient to transport. As a result, many armies used local materials, abandoning them after a single use. But there weren't any large siege weapons in the area, much less any trees that could be used as materials. Where had the merchants gotten siege weapons? Daluan Ruozan truly is formidable. Wang Chong was not as confused as Chen Shusan. After a moment's thought, Wang Chong understood. Modular assembly was a technology that belonged to another world. The steel walls that Wang Chong had set up on the mountain had been built using this technology. Every tall steel wall was actually made up of countless small steel modules. Daluan Ruozan's technology was clearly not that advanced, nor did his siege weapons need to be so complex and advanced. But there was no question that he was thinking along the same lines as Wang Chong. The Tang dynasty was renowned for its valiant infantry and defensive formations, and Xian Yuzhongtong was even more skilled in city defense. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Daluan Ruozan had undoubtedly predicted this in Lion City, which was why he had dismantled those siege weapons and brought them here to reassemble them. Without a doubt, the current situation was exactly as he had predicted. The steel walls that Wang Chong had brought here had transformed this place into a massive city, even larger than Lion City. At the very least, Lion City had not been this tall, nor had it been this tall. Even if Uzan's cavalry had charged into the city, they would not have been so heavily restricted and weakened. As expected, he's a formidable foe. Wang Chong said to himself. If the commander today had been Xian Yuzhongtong, the Annam Protectorate would have been doomed. But unfortunately, he had run into him. Pass on my order. Have the entire army get ready. Wang Chong said with a wave of his sleeve. Yes, your subordinate will obey. Layers upon layers of orders were passed down from the top of the mountain. Daluan Ruozan, let's see who's more formidable. My friend, let's see how you destroy my city wall formation. Whoosh! A fierce wind blew, and at some point, dark clouds had gathered in the sky. These dark clouds shone over the Annam Protectorate and the mountain. Winds foretold a storm, and at this moment, the great Tang army was deathly still. Deep within the enemy army, the shouts and chants were growing more and more ear-piercing. A stifling atmosphere pervaded the air. Although the war had come to an end, at first it was already over, but the tension that followed was simply suffocating. Rumble. After what seemed like an instant but also like countless eons, there was a flash of light from the Mengshi, Yusang army. A massive ball of fire rose up from the enemy ranks like a blazing sun, and then it began to grow in size as it flew toward the mountain where Wang Chang's forces were. 1. Chapter 580. But before any of the fireballs could hit the ground, massive fireballs began to rise up from the rear of the Mengshi, Yusang army, and then they began to fly toward the mountain where the Mengshi, Yusang army was located. Time seemed to slow down countless times as the massive fireballs floated in the air, slowly making their way toward the summit like snails. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dozens of huge fireballs were scattered all over the place, interweaving into a scorching sea of fire in the sky. Even the dark clouds in the sky were dyed with a layer of red light. Enemy attack. Dodge. A wave of screams came from the summit. Even though all the soldiers were dumbfounded by this sight, all the commanders, the high-ranking generals, the small groups of 5, 10-man squad leaders, 5-man squad leaders, all of them maintained absolute calm. Everything that could possibly happen had already been transmitted down layer by layer from the top of the mountain. Although no one had expected Mengshi Zhao and Uzun to attack in this manner, Wang Chong had already made detailed plans to deal with the possibility of a siege attack or a rain of arrows. Everyone, dodge. Pay attention to concealment. Voices that were full of energy and sounded like a great bell rang out one after another on the surface of the mountain range. Rumble. In an instant, all the Tang dynasty soldiers reacted. Using square formations as units, all the Tang dynasty soldiers charged toward the massive steel walls of the mountain. The mountain had always been sloping, and Wang Chang's modular steel walls had even been equipped with horizontal bunkers. At this moment, all the steel walls immediately revealed their other function. Boom! A huge fireball fell from the sky and heavily crashed into the mountain behind them. Smoke and dust rose everywhere, and the flames raged. The rolling dust rose more than 10 feet high, and the whole mountain trembled violently under this attack. Feeling the power of this attack, everyone's expression changed. The power displayed by this fireball was enough to instantly turn any soldier of any level into ash. No true martial realm warrior could withstand such a blow. Even a high-ranking captain like Su Wanduan might not be able to withstand it. On the mountaintop, Luoji and the other generals of the Annan Protectorate also changed their expressions. This kind of attack from Uzun's people was enough to pose a threat to generals of their level. Each of those huge fireballs weighed thousands of kilograms. Falling from such a great height, one could only imagine how powerful they were. However, this was only the beginning. Boom! 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 Time seemed to have sped up at this moment. Countless huge fireballs fell from the sky. Boom! A huge fireball fell from the sky and smashed into a steel city wall that was several meters tall. The incomparably hard steel city wall caved inwards, and a huge depression instantly appeared. The immense power contained in the fireball even caused the entire steel city wall to sway and tremble violently, as if it would be overturned at any moment. These fireballs are too powerful. Behind the steel city walls, the Tang dynasty elites all paled. They felt like these massive fireballs could topple over the steel city walls at any moment, pulverizing the soldiers hiding behind them. Young master, watch out! On the summit, a massive fireball suddenly descended from the sky, hurtling toward Wang Chong. Chen Shusun was alarmed and immediately pushed Wang Chong away with a palm. Rumble! The fireball struck a spot several zhang behind Wang Chong, sending a rain of fire mixed with shrapnel exploding in every direction. The place where Wang Chong had been standing was now a massive pit, its interior scorched black, billowing with thick smoke. Arabian fire oil. A powerful ring of stellar energy as tough as steel enveloped Wang Chong, blocking out the rain of fire and shrapnel. Wang Chong quickly retracted his stellar energy and walked out, his expression grave as he gazed at the still burning pit in the ground. Arabian fire oil was a product of the Far West, a product unique to Arabia and Kerak Spa Xenu. Based on Wang Chong's memories, this product was still a small-scale existence that had not been fully developed. Even Arabia and Kerak Spa Xenu probably didn't have much of it. Uzun was located on the plateau, separated from Arabia and Kerak Spa Xenu by Sinlu. Logically speaking, this product should never have appeared in the Uzun army. The current situation could only mean one thing: Uzun had already colluded with Arabia. The two sides were still far from reaching the level of Uzun and Mengshi Zhao's alliance, but there was no doubt that Arabia and Kerak Spa Xenu were supporting Uzun from behind the scenes. Arabia's ambitions in the Central Plains have probably started even earlier than I imagined. As Wang Chong gazed at the pit, countless thoughts flitted through his mind. The true conflict between Arabia and the Central Plains had actually occurred a very long time ago. In Wang Chong's memories, before his conflict with Gao Xianji and Feng Chongqing of the Anxi Protectorate, the Abbasid Caliphate and Kerak Spa Xenu had never displayed any ambitions for the interior of the empire. Arabian fire oil should have been a strategic resource that would only appear a very long time later. But now, the situation had clearly changed. Right now, there are only two possibilities. The first is that my appearance caused this change that doesn't conform to history. The other is that Uzun and the Abbasid Caliphate and Kerak Spa Xenu have been secretly communicating and colluding with each other for a very long time. This Arabian fire oil was sent to Uzun long ago. However, Xianyu Zhongtong and the Anam Protectorate simply didn't have the right to make Uzun use these siege weapons, and they were completely wiped out on the Arai Plains. Thus, the Tang dynasty never knew that Uzun possessed fire oil. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. The war in the southwest had undergone a massive change due to his intervention. At the very least, he had never heard of a war of the southwest lasting for so long, nor had he heard of a war with the Anam Protectorate requiring Uzun to use siege weapons. But no matter what the truth was, there was no doubt that the Abbasid Caliphate and Kerak Spa Xenu had sent reinforcements to Uzun. The Abbasid Caliphate and Kerak Spa Xenu definitely harbored malicious intentions toward the Tang dynasty. Boom boom boom. In the rear of Uzun and Mengshi Zhao's armies, one colossus after another rising into the air. Massive fireballs were hurled from the rear of the army, crashing into the mountain with thunderous speed. These fireballs kept exploding on the mountain. The flames spread and burned rapidly on the mountain peak. In a short time, the entire mountain peak was turned into a sea of fire. All the corpses and horses on the mountain began to burn. The flames were so large that even the distant Uzun and Mengshi Zhao armies at the base of the mountain could feel the waves of heat. Ha ha ha. We've completely suppressed the Tang people. The generals of Mengshi Zhao's army began to laugh, their expressions much more relaxed. The pressure from the previous battle had almost suffocated them. Although it had been the White Stone Legion and Duan Wuji who had taken part in the battle and not them, the teeth would feel cold without the lips, and the dogs would be cooked after the cunning hare was killed. The White Stone Legion was one of the top-class armies of Mengshi Zhao, but even they had been beaten into such a state. With less than 30% of the army remaining, one could easily imagine the pressure on the other generals. The power of these fireballs is truly not bad. It's no wonder we mobilized so many peasants, laborers, and porters to make so many thunderstone. As the sea of fire burned, all the Mengshi Zhao generals became excited as they gazed at the blazing mountain range. Although the kerosene had been provided by the Uzun, the entire plan, including the mass production of these siege weapons, had also been the idea of Daluan Ruozan and Uzun. Daluan Ruozan had even provided the blueprints for the improvements. But when it came to the actual operations, the fireballs, and the construction of the siege weapons, with the half-nomadic, half-agricultural nature of the highlanders of Uzun, it was impossible for them to produce such things. Without Mengshi Zhao's cooperation, even if Daluan Ruozan was said to be the most intelligent of the Ngari royal lineage, and even Zhangqiu Jianxiong was said to be somewhat afraid of him. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. Not to mention that the things the Tang people had built on the mountain were meant to deal with the Uzun cavalry. As for the Mengshi Zhao people, they were mainly infantry, so they weren't affected much. Don't celebrate too early. These fireballs have only suppressed them. It's still too early to talk about victory. Jelifeng looked at the mountain and suddenly said. His brows were deeply furrowed. In the distance, the flames soared into the sky, and the burning mountain looked like hell, suppressing all the Tang people. As far as he could see, he could barely see any Tang people, but Jelifeng was far from relaxed. This young man is more difficult to deal with than I thought. Jelifeng thought to himself. He could see far more than the others. The mountain in front of him was a sea of fire, and he could hear the shrill cries of death from time to time. But if he thought about it carefully, the number of Tang people who actually died in the fireball attacks was actually much fewer than he had imagined. The actual lethality of the fireballs was unbelievably low. In such a dense rain of fire, it was inconceivable that the 100-odd siege weapons that Uzun and Mengshi Zhao had spent a great deal of effort to build would die in such a battlefield. Jelifeng's gaze swept over the mountain peak, then quickly returned to the steel walls that were scattered like stars in the sky and covered the entire mountain like fish scales. Each of these steel walls was several feet tall and weighed thousands of kilograms. Thousands of such steel walls, layer upon layer, from top to bottom, covered the entire mountain, forming a solid defense and barrier for the Annam Protectorate. That was why there were 100,000 versus 500,000. Duan Wuxia led 100,000 White Stone Legion soldiers up the mountain, but they lost less than 30,000 of them. Even he himself was seriously injured. Thinking back to yesterday, when it was raining cats and dogs, this place was actually bare. But today, it was only a day's delay. In just one night, these magnificent steel walls appeared like a miracle. Chapter 581. Lion City, a strange art of war, and those steel fortresses on these mountains. Jelifeng had no idea how many more secrets this Tang dynasty youth had on him, how many more unknown things he was hiding. Everyone says that Wang Jiuling is the pillar of the Tang dynasty. As long as Jiuling doesn't fall, the Tang dynasty won't fall. I didn't believe it before, but now it seems that if we want to deal with the Tang dynasty, we first have to eradicate the Wang clan. Jelifeng slightly closed her eyes, an irrepressible killing intent surging in her heart. He had met Duke Jiu once when he was in Shangjing. But at the time, she had only met him briefly. She had always felt that his face was mediocre and only a so-so. Moreover, he was too benevolent, completely different from Duke Jiu's way of doing things. Later on, she had not taken it to heart. But Jelifeng had not expected that many years later, his son and grandson would all become stumbling blocks in her campaign to unify the southwest and conquer the Tang dynasty. Moreover, they were the most powerful ones that could not be ignored. Father, let me lead an army. Now is the best time to deal with the Tang people. A voice rang out by his ear, bringing Jelifeng back to the present. Fenjie was seated on the back of a majestic white horse, his eyes spitting vengeance as he stared at the summit. As the crown prince of Mengshi Zhao, Fenjie had always been farsighted. In his eyes, there were only imperial great generals like Huishu Wuzong, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Gishu Han, Gao Xianji, Zhang Shogui, and Wang Zhongxi. Fenjie had never imagined that he would place any importance on a youth who was only 10-some years younger than him. Moreover, this fellow was a nameless nobody. But Wang Chong had succeeded in all of this. You want to avenge Jiao Sero? Jelifeng's eyes widened. Although she showed no emotion on her face, she felt a deep displeasure in her heart. Jiao Sero was one of Uzun's people. No matter how close Fenjie was to Jiao Sero, this fact would not change. If someone were to say that Jiao Sero was seeking revenge, it should be the people of Uzun, not the crown prince of Mengshi Zhao Empire. This was simply putting the cart before the horse. If Fengjie was willing to lead the people of Mengshi Zhao into danger for the sake of a valiant general from a foreign country, then he truly would have to reconsider who the future successor to the Mengshi Zhao Empire would be. Yes, father. But not all of them. Fengjie stared blankly for a moment before sternly replying. Oh. Zheluo's brows twitched, and his expression relaxed. Imperial father, my relationship with Jiao Sero is a private matter, and I can distinguish between public and private matters. If Jiao Sero had died somewhere else or for some other reason, even if this child wanted to help, he would have done so alone. But this time, our Mengshi Zhao is fighting against the Tang dynasty. Jiao Sero died on the mountain while helping us attack the Tang dynasty. His death was not a private matter, but a public matter. Jiao Sero died for the public, so I, Fengjie, am absolutely duty-bound to avenge him. Fengjie's words caused both Zhelifeng and Duangechuan to instantly have a whole new level of respect for Fengjie. Not bad. For you to be able to think of this, your father's high regard for you is not in vain. However, it is not our turn yet. In our previous contact, we have already probed and nearly lost the entire White Stone Legion. Now, it is Hushu Wuzong and his Uzun army's turn. It's not that I don't want you to avenge Jiao Sero, but now is not the time for you to do so. In the future, we will have even more opportunities to cooperate with Uzun. You must learn to look further and see a higher level. Zhelifeng said. Your Highness the Crown Prince, even if you want to help, appearing at this time will only make things worse. It will make Uzun think that we are looking down on them. This will only be detrimental to our future cooperation. Duangechuan also spoke up from behind. It was like he didn't exist, forever standing in Zheluofeng's shadow. Just look at Uzun's side and you'll understand. Fengjie turned his head and saw a fierce Uzun general at Hushu Wuzong's side, a saber hanging from his waist in one hand, bowed and then walked out. Although he was short, not even Mengshi Zhao, let alone the Tang people, this Uzun general exuded a fierce aura that was like the wind or fire, like the mountains or the sea. It's him. But the aura exuded by this Uzun general was like the wind or the fire, like the mountains or the sea, a stark contrast to his short stature. It's him. Fengjie's mind jolted as this thought flitted through his mind. In this battle, almost all of Hushu Wuzong's generals had been killed or wounded. Of the 5 tiger generals, only the strongest, Longkinba, remained. But this didn't mean that he didn't have any soldiers under his command. The people of the plateau like Uzun were completely different from Mengshi Zhao and the Central Plains. The fact that their empire was divided into 4 royal lineages that controlled 4 major regions was strange enough, but what was even stranger was their foundation and base. When it wasn't at war, the Uzun were actually divided into tribes, each tribe doing its own thing and having its own leader. Normally, they weren't subject to any jurisdiction. Only when a large-scale war involving the Yusang Empire and the other empires was called upon would they gather from all over and form a massive army. In normal circumstances, if this method was used, whether it was the Tang dynasty or Mengshi Zhao, their morale would crumble and they wouldn't be able to fight at all. But the Uzun were different. Their people were valiant, and they took pride in fighting in fierce battles, even more so than the Turks. The Turks were fierce by nature, while the Uzun revered ferocity and longed for war. The two were completely different. But their fighting prowess was equally outstanding. Thus, the fighting prowess of the Uzun soldiers was not affected in the slightest. Their fighting prowess was on the level of an army. Moreover, although the tribes of the Uzun Empire were usually scattered throughout the lands, their way of life was not very different from that of an army. From birth, each person would begin military training, cultivating the military martial arts passed down from the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Thus, despite this strange tribal system, the Uzun soldiers were by no means weak in terms of fighting prowess. The only problem with this system was that Hushu Wuzong, as the great general of the Ngari royal lineage, was unable to control all the generals of the Ngari royal lineage. Only the 5 tiger generals under his command were able to provide him with a high punishment. But the Uzun actually had many fierce generals. Chapter 582. In terms of pure strength, Tumi Sangza might not be on the level of Longkinba, but he was definitely not one bit weaker than Jiao Sero, and he was even more ferocious than Longkinba. He was also a fierce general of the Uzun. Fenjie had tried to get in touch with him, but this person refused to speak and seemed very difficult to deal with. Jiao Sero once said that although Huishu Wuzong doesn't have many subordinates, as the great general of the Ngari royal lineage, he has the right to choose his subordinates. This is how the 5 tiger generals were originally chosen, but as long as the 5 tiger generals are present, Huishu Wuzong has no right to make a new choice. But now that most of the 5 tiger generals have been killed, this Tumi Sangza is definitely one of them. Fenjie quietly said to himself. Clang! While Fenjie was still speculating about Tumi Sangza's strength, Tumi Sangza sat on his horse, his dantian sinking. Clang! With a metallic clang, a massive black halo of thorns descended and spread to the entire army. This was not the halo of fortress that the Uzun were accustomed to, but a pure and powerful offensive halo. Soon after, Tumi Sangza reached out with his hands and slowly pulled out 2 curved scimitars. Attack! Rumble! Tumi Sangza took the lead, charging forward without the slightest hesitation. Behind him, the thousands of Uzun cavalry roared as they transformed into a black flood of steel. Aided by the massive fireballs, they charged up the mountain with thunderous speed. Kaiyil! Kaiyil! Behind him, the thousands of Uzun soldiers swiftly spread out into formation. 1 echelon, 2 echelons, 3 echelons, hundreds of echelons aimed at the gaps between the steel walls and charged up the mountain. This time, there were no Mengshi Zhao soldiers on the mountain, nor were there any of the Tang people's shield men. There was nothing left to stop the hooves of the Uzun cavalry. The victor is king, and the loser is a thief. Those who retreat die. Tumi Sangza's killing intent soared to the heavens as he led his vast army up the mountain. Kaiyil! Kill! Kill! Under the attack of the huge fireballs that were as dense as rain, the entire mountain was shrouded in a sea of fire. The Anam Protectorate was almost suppressed to the point that it could not even lift its head. The army led by Tumi Sangza was like a sharp blade stabbing towards the Tang people. Although Wang Chong had hidden nearly 100,000 soldiers on the mountain, they could not unleash their full power at this moment. Now, let's see how the Tang people deal with it. Feng Zheluo, Duangachuan, Fenjie, Huishu Wuzong, Longkinba, and all the other Mengshi, Yusang officers in the army were focused on the mountain. The first wave of probing had ended, and now it was time for the real attack. Although the commanders of the Anam Protectorate were Wang Yan and Shen Yuzhongtong, everyone now knew that the only person who could truly threaten the Mengshi, Yusang army was that youth on the summit. Aim the fireballs at the midpoint of the mountain and divide the front and back so that the Tang people can't send any soldiers. Kill all the Tang people below the midpoint of the mountain, and then deal with the army on the summit. I'd like to see just what this youth will do next. In the rear of the army, where the massive siege weapons were erected, Daluan Ruozan stood, his gaze locked with Wang Chong on the distant summit. Last night, he and Huishu Wuzong had come up with all the offensive plans. Wave after wave of attacks would come like a tide, and they would continue until the Tang people's army was drowned out and the remnants of the southwest were destroyed. This plan could not be said to be his, nor could it be said to be Huishu Wuzong's. It was the crystallization of their wisdom. Huishu Wuzong's military strategy and his own intellect, this was a tacit understanding that the two of them had developed over a very long time. Long ago, the two of them had relied on this method to subdue the ambitious Zhangzhou Jianqiong and his 180,000 Anam Protectorate. Now, Zhangzhou Jianqiong had been transferred to the capital, and his target had been that teenager on the other side of the mountain. 50 zhang, 30 zhang, the distance was getting shorter and shorter, but there was still no sign of activity on the mountain. When the distance was only 20 zhang, rumble. Suddenly, a rumble came from the mountain. Just when the Uzun cavalry were about to charge up the mountain, the Anan Protectorate soldiers suddenly appeared in the gaps between the steel walls. At the same time, a huge steel object was pushed out. Barricade. The Uzun soldiers' eyelids twitched at the sight of the metal object that had suddenly been pushed out. The object that had suddenly been pushed out was a massive steel platform. On the inclined surface of the platform were rows of long, chilling teeth that looked like the sharp teeth of a giant beast. All of them were aimed at the foot of the mountain. Thousands of these heavy steel barricades appeared in everyone's field of vision, circling around the mountain. This is impossible. The army had already charged to the foot of the mountain. Seeing these heavy metal barricades, even the ferocious Tumi Sangza couldn't help but pale. He had clearly seen the battle from the foot of the mountain. Duan Wuxi had led so many warriors of the White Stone Legion and Jiao Sero had led 10,000 cavalry. So many soldiers had charged up the mountain, but they hadn't seen any barricades at all. Where did these barricades come from? Tumi Sangza's eyelids twitched. Let alone him, even the calm and steady Huishu Wuzong couldn't help but raise his head to look at the mountain. This again. It seems like he's prepared. The steel walls had been created by Wang Chong overnight, and now, in front of everyone's eyes, he had created these heavy barricades. Huishu Wuzong was rarely moved by anything, but the fact that Wang Chong had been able to create these heavy barricades in such a short time without anyone noticing, even a great general like Huishu Wuzong couldn't help but be moved. There was no doubt that Wang Chong had been prepared. Huishu Wuzong had fought for so long in his life and encountered all sorts of formidable opponents. But this was the first time he had encountered such a difficult opponent. Alas, my opponent is Tumi Sangza. A sharp light flashed through Huishu Wuzong's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. At the same time, as if in response to Huishu Wuzong, Tumi Sangza roared. "Humph, do you think this will work? Childish. Break for me." When everyone's speed slowed down in front of the barricades, Tumi Sangya gave a loud shout, his entire body erupting with a majestic aura. His speed did not slow down but instead increased, allowing him to stand out from the crowd. Rumble. The earth quaked, and invisible ripples spread out in all directions from Tumi Sangza. These black ripples seemed to have a life of their own. Through the void, they wrapped around the steel walls and the barricades. Black Iron Jin, get up. Tumi Sangza's eyes turned sharp as he roared and slammed down. Rumble. Boom. The entire mountain seemed to tremble. In front of everyone's eyes, the air became blurry, and huge steel walls that weighed several thousand jin and were nearly as tall as two people suddenly collapsed inwards, shrank, and twisted. Roar. In front of both friend and foe, within a radius of several dozen feet around Tumi Sangza, four massive steel walls suddenly rose from the ground and transformed into four steel giants that were several dozen feet tall. Thick arms, huge heads, and terrifying strength. A storm-like aura emanated from these four steel giants. In a flash, everyone, including Wang Chong, who was supervising the battle from the summit, slightly paled. No one was more shocked than Mengshi Zhao's crown prince, Fenjie. This fellow's black iron halo has reached this level of cultivation. Fenjie had never known that Tumi Sangza cultivated the same black iron halo as himself, and most frightening of all was that Tumi Sangza's black iron halo had reached a higher level than his own. At the very least, Fenjie's ability had not reached the level where he could transform the Tang people's steel walls. Young master, what do we do? At the same time, Chen Shusun turned to look at Wang Chong. The greatest defense of this mountain were the steel modular walls that Wang Chong had laid down. Without these steel walls, Mengshi Zhao and Uzun's cavalry would have been able to charge all the way from the base of the mountain to the summit. Infantry were skilled at defense. Without these walls, the Anan Protectorate would not have been able to display its full strength. Chapter 583. There's no need to worry. On the summit, Wang Chong looked down in Tumi Sangza's direction. From a distance, he could see that Tumi Sangza was exuding an astonishing aura. His halo of black iron thorns enveloped the earth, and wherever it pressed down, countless bits of metal would emerge from the ground and quickly condense into metal soldiers. Tumi Sangza's halo of black iron thorns was even more powerful than Fenjie's, so he was able to summon more metal soldiers. In the blink of an eye, nearly 100 metal soldiers had appeared around Tumi Sangza. Not only that, a group of Tang people infantry formed into a square formation and charged at Tumi Sangza. Before they could get close, their armor twisted and broke out of their bodies, transforming into metal soldiers. Their limbs transformed into swords, sabers, or spears as they swiftly began to battle with the Anam Protectorate soldiers. These metal soldiers did not have stellar energy to protect their bodies, but their advantage lay in their unpredictability. Their attacks were impossible to defend against, and they could not be killed. In a few short moments, before Tumi Sangza had even attacked, the metal soldiers he had summoned had thrown the battlefield into chaos. But most frightening of all was the damage that Tumi Sangza's halo of black iron was doing to the steel walls. Under the effect of Tumi Sangza's halo, the towering steel walls began to warp and transform into massive steel giants that charged up the mountain. Boom boom boom. Giant metal fists smashed down from the sky, each fist carrying the weight of 1,000 Jun, causing dust to roil and the earth to quake. After the Battle of Irai and the Battle of Lion City, the remaining Tang elites could not even take a casual blow from these metal giants. A casual blow from these metal giants, a smash, a fling, or a collision, would cause all the Anam Protectorate soldiers in front of them to scream and fly into the air. Not a single person on the mountain was a match for them. And Tumi Sangza was still summoning even more of these metal giants, working with the massive fireballs descending from the sky to suppress the Tang soldiers. It appeared that Wang Chong's painstaking preparations were about to be destroyed. But even so, Wang Chong still had a smile on his lips, his expression calm. Although I don't know the origins of this Uzun general or how he managed to cultivate such a powerful black metal halo, if he thinks that this is enough to destroy the steel walls I brought from the capital for this battle, then he's far too naive. Ah! Chen Shusun was dumbfounded, his face blank. To a certain extent, he had watched Wang Chong grow up. But at this moment, as he gazed at the smiling youth at his side, his every movement composed and imposing, Chen Shusun felt somewhat unfathomable. Although he was much older than Wang Chong. These steel modules have sturdy inscriptions on them. Every steel wall has sturdy inscriptions of various sizes. There are at least thousands of them. If that foreign general only wanted to transform 4 steel city walls, it would be fine. But if he wanted to twist all the steel city walls into his iron men, that would be wishful thinking. He's too naive. Wang Chong indifferently said as he looked down the mountain. Although he was young, Wang Chong's experience, vision, and knowledge left even a veteran general like Chen Shusun in the dust. If Chen Shusun knew that the body of this youth next to him contained the soul of the most powerful and revered war saint in the history of the Central Plains, he would probably be so shocked that he wouldn't be able to speak. The War of the Southwest was the Empire's first war, and also its most important. This was the place where the first domino would fall. This war concerned the future of the Tang dynasty and the Central Plains, so Wang Chong had no path of retreat and had to put all his strength into it. In this war, Wang Chong had not expected to encounter experts with metal element halos like Fenjie and Tumi Sangza, especially Tumi Sangza, whose black iron halo was far superior to Fenjie's, posing a massive threat to Wang Chong's strategy of turning defense into offense. But these steel modular walls were related to the life and death of the 100,000 Anam Protectorate soldiers and the safety of the nearly millions of civilians of the Southwest. Thus, when building these steel modular walls, Wang Chong had spent almost all of his wealth. Wang Chong had invested everything he had gained from the Hyderabad ore and the Wuxia steel swords. Not only that, in order to obtain enough money, Wang Chong had even sold the majority of his spirit vein mountain, causing all the great clans of the capital, the rich and powerful, and even the scions of the imperial household to go crazy. The enormous wealth accumulated from these things was enough to make Wang Chong one of the wealthiest people in the empire. He had more than enough money to build a few cities like Lion City. But in the end, Wang Chong had invested all of it into these steel modular walls. Inside each seemingly ordinary steel city wall, each inch of narrow steel was added with a large number of inscriptions of various sizes when it was cast. Almost all the inscription masters of the capital had been summoned by Wang Chong to participate in this unprecedented operation. This sort of operation had never appeared in the capital before, and no one had ever done it before. One could say that the price of these steel modular walls was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. This was an operation of wealth. Wang Chong did not have the manpower to change the course of a war, so he could only work from the aspect of wealth. If Tumi Sangza wanted to deal with Wang Chong, if he wanted to turn this mountain of steel walls into ash and create the steel army he desired, he first had to overcome the countless toughening inscriptions of various sizes that Wang Chong had added to the steel walls. Although this was no problem for someone of Tumi Sangza's abilities, it was impossible to accomplish this without paying a price. Buzz. The air twisted and blurred. Wherever Tumi Sangza's halo passed, the steel walls at the base of the mountain would twist and deform as if they were alive. This time, Tumi Sangza's halo of black steel had enveloped at least 10 steel walls. If he could do this, not only would the mountain gain 10 steel giants of boundless strength that could never be killed, a massive hole would also be torn in the Annam Protectorate's defenses. But a moment later, Tumi Sangza's face paled as if he had been dealt a heavy blow, beads of sweat appearing on his forehead. And to his left and right, the steel walls that were on the verge of being deformed by Tumi Sangza's halo instantly returned to normal, as if their connection to Tumi Sangza had been severed. The process of transforming the steel giants had been severed. Although they were still a distance away and massive fireballs were crashing down, Chen Shusun quickly understood that Wang Chong was correct when he saw Tumi Sangza's pale face turn to the summit as if he had seen a ghost. He really can't transform them. Chen Shusun's mind trembled as he suddenly understood. Not even a great general of Wuxia Huizong's level might be able to transform all the steel walls I brought into metal element metal men, much less this foreign general. With his abilities, for steel giants was probably his limit. In the future, each additional steel giant he summons will consume a vast amount of stellar energy. If an expert of his level is willing to do this, I would welcome him with open arms. Wang Chong smiled. In front of the mighty war saint, no one could be so calm and relaxed. Not even Daluan Ruozhen could do such a thing, much less these foreign generals. War had to be fought step by step. If Ozhen and Meng Shizhao hoped to defeat him like this, it was impossible. On the other side, Tumi Sangza clearly understood this principle and quickly changed his strategy. Roar, with a heaven-shaking roar, pitch-black halos exploded from beneath Tumi Sangza's feet. All around him, the steel men fiercely fighting on the front lines seemed to be attracted by a magnetic force, rising into the air and sucking toward Tumi Sangza's body. Clang clang clang. With a shrill clattering of metal, countless steel men and metal scraps drifted out of the ground and attached themselves to Tumi Sangza's body. These steel men and metal scraps rapidly melted, transforming into a thick armor that wrapped around Tumi Sangza. Tumi Sangza's figure continued to rise higher and higher. In just a few short moments, Tumi Sangza had vanished, replaced by a stalwart steel giant that was 10 some zhang tall and seemed like a demon god. Dust roiled around him, soaring into the sky as a massive aura exploded from the steel giant's body. Where did this fellow come from? Isn't he too powerful? Not even Jiao Sero is as powerful as him. Ozhen actually had such a powerful expert. At this moment, no one was more shocked than the people of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. After fighting side by side with Ozhen for several months, they were most familiar with the 5 tiger generals under Wuxia Huizong's command. As for the man before them, although they had seen him a few times, the 5 tiger generals were the ones leading the charge. But when they charged and broke through enemy lines, the 5 tiger generals were the ones leading them, so none of them had any impression of this valiant general. Of the 5 element halos, the metal element is the least cultivated and also the most difficult. Its success rate far surpasses the other elements. For this Uzun man to be able to use the halo of black iron to this level, he should have reached, or perhaps even approached, the higher level of the bronze halo. For this general to be able to think of this method, in terms of defensive power, he has already surpassed Jiao Sero. Your Highness Crown Prince, you cultivate the same halo of black iron as him. You should pay special attention to this person's next actions and learn from him. Perhaps he will be of great help to you. A voice came from behind them. It was Meng Shizhao's great general Duangechuan. Jia understands. Many thanks for great general's guidance. Fenjie sincerely said. Fenjie had always treated this great general who had always been hiding behind the scenes, hiding in his father's shadow, with great respect. The surroundings quickly fell silent. Chapter 584. Bang! The 10 tall metal giant smashed down with his fist, sending a steel wall several dozen zhang high flying, sending 10 Samanam protectorate warriors flying. Several dozen zhang away, the steel wall crashed to the ground, sending up a cloud of dust. Jiao Sero, useless thing. Watch as I slaughter these Tang people. I'll show you what a true expert of the plateau is, a mighty eagle in the sky. Tumi Sangza's loud voice resounded through the sky in Uzun. With a single step, he crossed the distance of 28 zhang and began to ascend the mountain. Hong, he casually punched out again. Smoke and dust billowed, and another heavy piece of the city wall was sent tumbling away. At this sight, even Wang Chong couldn't help but widen his eyes. The metal element halo was known as the strongest of the 5 elements, and the fighting power Tumi Sangza displayed could be called abnormal. Although he was only using brute force, this method was even more troublesome and difficult to deal with than before. Not bad. At the base of the mountain, Huishu Wuzong stood tall and straight like a mountain. His imposing figure exuded a boundless and unshakable aura. Only he was not surprised by Tumi Sangza's performance. Jiao Sero and the fierce generals of the plateau like Tumi Sangza had always been at odds. This was a special selection method of the Uzun. The tribal generals and the 5 tiger generals would scheme against each other, and only the true experts would survive and assume the position of tiger generals. Whether it was Longkinba, Jiao Sero, or those dead generals, they had all been selected in this manner. Thus, Huishu Wuzong did not care much about Jiao Sero's death. Now, let's see what you do. A hint of a smile appeared in Huishu Wuzong's eyes as he looked up at the summit. Massive fireballs filling the sky and a fierce general like Tumi Sangza would render even Zhangqiu Jianxiong powerless. But Huishu Huizong felt a sliver of anticipation toward that youth on the summit who had consecutively defeated his subordinates. Politics was something only Daluan Ruozhen would consider. As a pure general and soldier, Huishu Wuzong was only interested in the appearance of a powerful opponent and the destruction of this opponent. The eagle, it's your turn. Your cultivation should be almost done, right? Wang Chong suddenly said. Yes, young master. A familiar voice rang out. As the voice faded, a familiar figure walked out. It was the eagle who had been following Wang Chong for a long time. After not seeing him for a period of time, the eagle's spirit, energy, and spirit had all improved by a level, completely different from before. Now, I have completely broken through to the Xian martial realm and reached the 3rd or 4th Xian martial realm. I also know how to use the 6-armed Xitigarbavitra. Now, I should be able to compete with cultivators of the 6th or 7th Xian Qi layer. The eagle's eyes glowed with confidence. As an expert of the older generation of the capital, the eagle had been stuck at the 9th level of the true martial realm for the longest time among his companions. Because of his talent, he had never been able to break through. But it was also for this reason that his accumulation had reached a level that ordinary martial artists would find difficult to even dream of. Given the eagle's situation, no matter how much accumulation he had accumulated, it would be useless if he could not break through the threshold of the Xian martial realm. But the six-armed Ksitigarbha Vajra had provided him with a chance to break through. Thus, the moment the eagle broke through, he was like mercury spilling into the ground. He didn't even need to go through Tier 1 or 2 of the Xian martial realm before exploding to Tier 3 of the Xian martial realm, approaching Tier 4. The eagle now possessed the ability to play an important role. This was also why Wang Chong had never used him before. That foreigner is extremely powerful. Only our Wuxia steel sword can break his martial arts. But just you alone won't be enough. Luoji, you go as well. Wang Chong swept his gaze to the left and firmly said. Yes, this general will go. Luoji bowed. No one in the Annam Protectorate dared to disobey Wang Chong's orders. Everyone treated Wang Chong as the Annam Protectorate's great benefactor. Without him, the Annam Protectorate would have been wiped out long ago. Moreover, Wang Chong had Zhangqiu Jianxiong's orders. General Lin, you go as well. Wang Chong looked behind Luoji and said. Yes, this subordinate will go. Lin Wuxiu immediately replied. Wang Chong was publicly acknowledged as the best and most suitable commander of the Army of the Southwest. Even General Wang and Protector General Xianyu had surrendered their authority to him, let alone anyone else. But you alone won't be enough. Zhang Long. This subordinate is here. Give the Wuxia steel sword in your hand to General Lin. Yes, this subordinate will go. In the Southwest Army, only Wang Chong's subordinates were equipped with Wuxia steel weapons, and only Wuxia steel swords could deal with an expert with a metal element halo like Tumi Sangza's. Ordinary sabers and swords could be easily deformed in front of Tumi Sangza, snatched away, and turned into metal men that were completely unusable. Gallop. The Eagle, Luoji, and Lin Wuxiu equipped themselves with Wang Chong's Wuxia steel swords and the meteoric metal armor they had taken from the Black Dragon bandit members as they charged down the mountain. Boom boom boom. Massive fireballs rained down from the sky, creating a sea of fire on the mountain. But the Eagle, Luoji, and Lin Wuxiu were able to weave as freely as the wind. At their level, these fireballs would not even be able to hit them, much less threaten them. The trio moved with incredible speed, and it only took a few moments for them to reach the base of the mountain. Foreign General, take this. With a heaven-shaking roar, the eagle's body blurred, instantly vanishing. In his place was a six-armed Ksitigarbha Vajra guardian, each of his 6 arms holding 6 swords. Clang! With a flash, the 6-armed Ksitigarbha Vajra guardian leaped forward, its body inconceivably agile. The 6 Wuxia steel swords slashed down. Boom! A large amount of refined iron was immediately cut off from the metal giant that Tumi Sangza had transformed into. Ksitigarbha Vajra guardian. You took something from Batunlu. Tumi Sangza roared over the battlefield. Like a primordial beast, he fiercely punched at the eagle. You shouldn't have taken something from the great snow mountain temple. Return it to me. Careful. Only at close range could one sense the power of the metal giant that Tumi Sangza had transformed into. This power was simply irresistible. And the thick layer of steel made it difficult for any weapon to truly threaten Tumi Sangza. Bang bang bang. With a shout, Luoji and Lin Wuxiu charged into the sky, brandishing their Wuxia steel weapons. The 4 peak experts of the profound martial realm fiercely clashed on the battlefield. On the other side, nearly 10,000 Uzan cavalry were battling with the Annam Protectorate on the mountain. Get ready. Wang Chong's gaze only paused on Tumi Sangza, the Eagle, Luoji, and Lin Wuxiu for a few moments before looking away. As a commander-in-chief of an army, what he needed to pay attention to was never a battle between 2 generals. Rather, he needed to look at the entire situation and decide the outcome of a battle. Leading the army to victory was a matter of strategy. This was what a commander-in-chief should do. Tumi Sangza's side still isn't strong enough. It won't be long before Wuxia Wuzong sends his cavalry to launch a large-scale attack. Pass on my order to reinforce the Yuzhen at any time. But young master, in the current situation, they're constantly using fireballs to attack. We simply can't get close. Chen Shusun worriedly said. Humph, relax. It's not easy to prepare these fireballs. The southwest is a land of hills and plains, and it's very difficult for Daluan Ruozhen to get many of them. Moreover, I don't know about anything else, but the Yuzhen definitely doesn't have many Arab kerosene soldiers. It won't take long for these fireballs to run out. From the very start, Wuxia Wuzong's goal has been to destroy my defenses. Have Mr. Zhang get ready. Bring some craftsmen and use this time to repair the damaged steel walls. The Mr. Zhang Wang Chong spoke of was naturally Zhang Shouji of the Bureau of Works. The greatest advantage of the modular steel walls was that they were easy to dismantle, move, and repair. It was impossible for Wuxia Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen to rely on these kinds of attacks to destroy his steel defense lines. Yes, I'll make the arrangements. Chapter 585. Wuxia Wuzong's attack was far faster than expected. Xiren Xiangxiong, you should go as well. Wuxia Wuzong suddenly said as he gazed at the summit. Yes, General. A voice came from behind him. Amidst the clanging of armor, a fierce-looking Yuzhen general with a rough aura mounted his horse and galloped away. Follow me. With this order, the sturdy Yuzhen general known as Xiren Xiangxiong leaped forward, the earth churning behind him as thousands of Yuzhen cavalry followed. Young master, the Yuzhen have moved out. Chen Shusun turned to Wang Chong. Once more, Chen Shusun felt an indescribable sense of admiration. Everything was going exactly as Wang Chong had predicted. Has the order been passed down? Wang Chong stood on the summit, his eyes calm. It has been passed down. Then let's begin. Wang Chong indifferently said. Rumble. Battle cries shook the mountain as thousands of Yuzhen cavalry surged up the mountain, madly charging at the barricades, the steel walls, and the Annam Protectorate. At the same time, massive fireballs smashed against the mountain, maintaining the front and back lines of the Annam Protectorate. Break down those barricades and use ropes to break them open. Some of you dismount and work together to push the barricades away. Go from General Tumi Sangza and attack them from the back. All the Yuzhen leaders and generals were madly shouting, hoping to completely tear apart the Annam Protectorate's defenses. At the same time, the Annam Protectorate at the base of the mountain was sacrificing their lives. Hold! Hold! Milord has ordered that no one is allowed to retreat. Shield men! Shield men! Hold the barricades! Don't let them drag us away. If they break through our defenses, all of us will die. The atmosphere was extremely tense. One side wanted to attack the summit and completely wipe out the obstacles in the southwest, while the other side wanted to desperately defend and survive. Neither side had a path of retreat. General Not. You go too. Wuxia Wuzong looked at the fierce battle on the mountain and suddenly frowned. Yes, General. A valiant warrior from the Yuzhen plateau quickly responded and left. Follow me. As soon as the order was given, dust and sand billowed. Another group of close to 10,000 Yuzhen iron warriors rushed up the mountain as fast as lightning. At this point, Wuxia Wuzong had sent more than 30,000 soldiers to attack the mountain, which was a considerable number. The strength of the cavalry was far superior to that of the infantry. On the plains, these 30,000 cavalrymen were enough to deal with 300,000 infantry. But at this moment, their opponents were only the 10,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers on the mountain. Boom! 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 The sound of the horses colliding and kicking rang out incessantly. The shields let out loud chimes of "defend" as they shouted. An Anam Protectorate's shield was supported by at least 2 to 3 people, sometimes even 5 to 6. Everyone was squeezed together, using the strength of their bodies to resist the charge of the Uzun cavalry. Again. Wuxia Wuzong frowned and ordered again. With the situation on the mountain, the force of 40,000 cavalrymen charging at the same time was enough to overturn the mountains and overturn the seas. No matter how many people there was no way they could get involved. At least not until the first line of defense of the Anam Protectorate was broken. Kill! Amidst the fierce battle cries, the 4th Uzun army finally arrived on the battlefield. Looking down from the sky, the foot of the mountain was covered in a vast expanse of Uzun warriors. Kill them! Similar shouts in the Uzun language resounded over the battlefield. In the face of the wave after wave of Uzun attacks, the Anam Protectorate soldiers on the front lines were under unimaginable pressure. The fragile defense line could collapse at any moment. And the most fatal of all was the passage that Tumi Sangza had opened. An endless stream of Uzun soldiers charged up the mountain through that opening. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. At this moment, time seemed to be incomparably long. The Tang dynasty's defense line swayed, seemingly on the verge of collapse. Increase the attacks. They can't hold on much longer. Wave after wave of Uzun attacks rained down on the Anam Protectorate's first line of defense, but the one who truly collapsed it was an unexpected person. Boom! At some point, Tumi Sangza had thrown off Luoji, the eagle, and Lin Wuxian charged out of their encirclement, sending a heavy steel wall flying with a single punch. Bzzz. As if on some sort of signal, all the barricades and shields around him had been opened. The first line of the Anam Protectorate's defense line had been completely opened. Kill! After a brief moment of silence, all the Uzun cavalry seemed to realize something. Their spirits were roused, and even the Mengshi, Yusang soldiers watching the battle from the base of the mountain were in high spirits. Wonderful! Kill them all! Everyone could smell the hope of victory. It seemed like they had finally found a way to defeat the Tang people. But a moment later, before the 40,000 Uzun cavalry could charge, and before the excitement and joy in the hearts of the Mengshi, Yusang army could last very long, the greatest change occurred. When the barricades were torn down, the shields were destroyed, and the defense line was broken, the Anam Protectorate soldiers almost immediately took cover behind the steel walls. Swish! A thick arrow suddenly tore through the air, piercing through a charging Uzun horseman at the base of the mountain. In the neigh, the warhorse neighed and the rider reared. That precious and sturdy Uzun highland steed didn't even have time to neigh before it and its rider toppled to the ground. After piercing through them, the thick arrow continued to pierce through a second Uzun horseman, and then a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth. As the Uzun madly attacked, a large number of Uzun cavalry had gathered at the base of the mountain, and it was impossible to tell just how many people there were in this small area. But at this moment, the Uzun strategy had become a fatal error. Bang 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 bang. The arrow pierced through 10 some Uzun horsemen, leaving behind a straight, bloody hole. Only then did it stop and fall from the sky. The Tang people's ballistae. A panicked voice rang out, a voice that made everyone tremble in fear. At this moment, all the Uzun soldiers gathered at the base of the mountain felt their blood freeze. The Uzun were famed for their thick plate armor, but this plate armor had a perfect nemesis, the ballistae of the Tang dynasty. The massive bolts fired from those ballistae could easily pierce through all the Uzun soldiers in a straight line. There was no mistaking that terrifying explosion just now. It was the sound of the Tang dynasty ballistae. Shio 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 shio. Just as everyone began to realize this, Wang Chang's hidden hand was also displayed. Halfway up the mountain, the sound of arrows piercing through the air could be heard. At this moment, countless ballistae lined up on the mountain began to fire. The blazing flames and the fireballs filling the sky could stop the Anam Protectorate soldiers on the mountain, but they could not stop the famous ballistae of the Tang dynasty. Pang, pang, pang. With a series of sounds, tens of thousands of crossbow bolts whistled down, piercing through countless Uzun Empire cavalry along the way. The densely packed Uzun cavalry did not even make a sound. They were like grasshoppers that had been sprang up, falling down from the front to the back like wooden stakes. The concentrated sounds of heavy objects falling caused everyone who saw and heard it to feel a chill in their hearts. As expected, the Uzun soldiers who appeared in front of the steel walls fell one after another. Harvest. This was a true harvest. In a few short moments, the number of Uzun soldiers who had fallen to the ballistae far exceeded the number of soldiers who had charged at the Tang dynasty's defenses. Crossbow bolts flew out one after another, callous and decisive. Chapter 586. Bastard. This brat is too crafty. In Meng Shizhao's army, Fenjie clenched his fists. He was sure that Wang Chong had arranged for these ballistae to be there when Tumi Sangza had attacked. In the previous battle, those ballistae had never been there. Even Meng Shizhao's sea of fire was used by him. This fellow is truly terrifying. The Wang clan is known as a clan of ministers and generals, but this sort of foundation is too frightening. The Meng Shizhao generals were also alarmed, a deep apprehension rising in their hearts. What sort of person was Daluan Ruozhen? What sort of person was Huishu Wuzong? Although Meng Shizhao and Uzun weren't enemies, there was no one on the southwest border who didn't understand these two. If either of these two had appeared on Meng Shizhao's border, everyone would have felt as if they were facing a great foe. But this youth called Wang Chong was actually able to face them head-on, attacking and defending at the same time. Even Daluan Ruozhen's fireballs were being used by him to protect himself and neutralized the attacks of the Uzun. Everyone even suspected that this Wang Chong was intentionally luring the Uzun into gathering them at the base of the mountain. Once they reached the peak of their numbers, he would immediately take out the Tang dynasty ballistae. In normal circumstances, the Tang dynasty ballistae, no matter how formidable, would only be able to kill 3 or 4 people, and this was even when the enemy was charging at them. But now, against such a dense army of cavalry, a single arrow could kill more than 10 people. Some ballista bolts even pierced through and killed 15 or 16 cavalry in a straight line. In just a few moments, this volley of ballista bolts had killed at least 4,000 or 5,000 Uzun soldiers. Boom, boom, boom. Another wave of arrows whistled down from the top of the mountain. This time, the effect was not as obvious as before, but 2,000 to 3,000 Uzun cavalrymen and their horses fell heavily onto the hillside. Blood flowed down the mountain like a gurgling stream. The warhorse neigh's terrified cries rang out incessantly. The whole mountain was in a state of panic. This scene caused Huishu Wuzong's eyelids to twitch madly. Even though he had been in the southwest for so long, had clashed with the Tang people many times, and had seen the power of these weapons of the Tang dynasty more than once, even though he was a veteran of battle, he still found it hard to remain calm when he saw the ballistae in Wang Chong's hands. Although the Uzun Gari royal lineage still had more than 200,000 cavalry and the loss of several thousand cavalry wasn't much, it had to be realized that the Uzun Empire had spent 30-some years and a great deal of time and energy to create these 200,000 cavalry. Even if the Uzun people wanted to create another one in such a short time, it would not be so easy. Change targets. Destroy those Tang dynasty ballistae. Huishu Wuzong suddenly raised an arm and firmly ordered. Yes, General. Before the order could reach the rear, a new change occurred on the hillside. After 2 volleys of arrows, Tang dynasty ballista soldiers suddenly appeared and swiftly pulled the ballistae back behind the steel walls. In just a few seconds, the ballistae vanished without a trace, just as if they had just appeared. But at this moment, Tumi Sangza, Tsiren Xiangxiong, and Zhajiexiji, the 3 warriors of the Uzun 8 tribes, felt a deep sense of apprehension. The fact that the Tang dynasty had withdrawn the ballistae was far more worrying than if they had allowed them to continue firing. No one knew when the ballistae would reappear and fire again. This sort of feeling was almost impossible to guard against. Moreover, the ballistae of the Tang dynasty needed to be reloaded after firing 2 or 3 bolts. By withdrawing the ballistae, Wang Chong could use this opportunity to reload, and when they reappeared, they would be reloaded with bolts. At that time, it would be a new round of harvesting. Everyone who understood Wang Chong's strategy felt a chill in their hearts. This was not the first time the ballistae of the Tang dynasty had appeared, but no one had ever used them to such a terrifying degree like Wang Chong. Damn it! Delay them for me. As long as we can delay those Tang people, they won't be able to fire normally. Someone, charge. Destroy those ballistae. Pay attention, use their steel walls to dodge. The Uzun army had no lack of intelligent people, and some of them immediately saw through the crux of this matter. If they tangled with the Tang people and began to fight, the Annam Protectorate would have some misgivings and would never randomly fire ballistae. In addition, the steel walls that Wang Chong had set up on the mountain could also be used to dodge the attacks of the ballistae. But the Uzun were famed for their cavalry charges, and they excelled at offense. Defense and positional warfare were things that only the infantry of the Tang dynasty excelled at. If the cavalry hid behind the steel walls, there would be no point in attacking. Bastard! Follow me! Tumi Sangza, wrapped in thick metal armor, suddenly roared. A pitch-black halo of thorns shook the area. Cries of alarm rang out as the armor of the Tang people soldiers burst out of their bodies, transforming into hundreds of metal men that charged into the sea of fire and the ballistae. At the same time, Tumi Sangza struggled to free himself from the attacks of the Eagle, Luoji, and Lin Wuguan. His mountainous steel body charged up the mountain. The blazing sea of fire didn't even reach the metal giant's knees and was completely incapable of harming him. Rumble. The entire mountain trembled beneath Tumi Sangza's footsteps. But before Tumi Sangza could take more than a few steps, he seemed to sense something. His body shook and he raised his head. In the overcast sky, a massive ball of fire like a blazing sun grew larger and larger. With a boom, it crashed into a place 10 some zhang away from Tumi Sangza. Flames, shockwaves, and explosions swept out in all directions. But as this massive ball of fire fell, the sky instantly fell silent. No more fireballs fell. At some point, the siege weapons in the rear had used up their last fireball. This dense rain of fireballs had finally come to an end. For a moment, the entire mountain was deathly still, not a single sound coming from it. It's over. On the summit, Wang Chong watched as the final fireball fell, a hint of a smile on his lips. Everything had gone as he had expected. No matter how monstrously intelligent Daluan Ruozhen was, no matter how meticulous he would never have predicted that he would be here, nor that he would have built a lion city and a steel fortress in the southwest. In such a short period of time, Daluan Ruozhen's reserves were bound to be insufficient. Thus, this fireball attack was bound to not last for too long. Let's go. Wang Chong indifferently said as he looked down the mountain in the breeze. Roar. An earth-shattering roar came from the summit, as if time had stopped moving. In the blink of an eye, countless figures appeared on the previously empty summit. Now, it was the Annam Protectorate's turn to counterattack. Kaiyil. Waves of roars shook the mountain and soared into the sky. The Annam Protectorate, which had been hiding behind the steel walls, suddenly charged out of their hiding place. Tens of thousands of them gathered into a flood of steel that surged toward the base of the mountain. Their momentum was overwhelming, capable of toppling mountains and overturning seas. Foreign traitors. Hand over your life. Fierce shouts came from the summit. Countless Annam Protectorate generals with powerful auras were mixed in with the storm of Annam Protectorate generals as they charged down the mountain. At this moment, even someone as arrogant as Tumi Sangza couldn't help but widen his eyes. Although the Tang dynasty had indulged in peace and was no longer as powerful as before, a starving camel was still larger than a horse, and its army was still filled with talents. The number of generals it had far surpassed that of Uzun and Meng Shizhao. One eagle, one Luoji, and one Lin Wuxiu were more than enough to deal with, and now there were so many of them charging at him. Retreat! Retreat! Hurry and retreat! Tumi Sangza bellowed. The 30,000 Samuzan soldiers could not stop so many Tang people, and without the support of the fireballs, they had lost their advantage in this battle. Nay! The warhorses neighed. After the ballista attacks, their morale had fallen to rock bottom, much less now. In a flash, the entire battle had been reversed. The first to flee were the farthest Uzun soldiers at the base of the mountain. Next, the cavalry on the mountain also turned and began to flee. Tumi Sangza and the others, after holding them back for a while, also began to flee down the mountain. In this kind of war, getting entangled in a battle like this would only mean death. Ha! Seeing the Uzun soldiers flee, the mountain exploded with cheers. Huishu Wuzong also failed. In a place where no one was paying attention, Jelifeng stared at the summit, his eyes flashing. After a long time, he said nothing. His gaze was so profound that no one could tell what he was thinking. In order to construct these things, Doluan Ruozan spent a great deal of our resources. But in the end, their killing power was limited. A cold voice came from behind Jelifeng. It's not that Huishu Wuzong is too weak. Yes. Another voice echoed. The crux lies in that child. That child is even more difficult to deal with than we imagined. The Tang dynasty is already powerful enough. One Duke Jiao was enough back then. There's no need for a second, or a third. A cold light flashed in Jelifeng's eyes. In truth, he had not experienced yesterday's battle, just like Doluan Ruozan. He simply listened to the narration of those who had come back. However, there were some people whom a mere meeting was enough to make people want to kill them. In this battle, it's no longer important that the Southwestern Protectorate Army isn't completely destroyed. But that youth called Wang Chong must die. With these final words, Jelifeng's eyes shone with astonishing killing intent. Your Majesty, be at ease. He won't be able to walk out alive. Chapter 587. The battle quickly came to an end. Uzun's forces did not launch a new wave of attacks, and the Anam Protectorate did not pursue. With the base of the mountain as the boundary, a seemingly invisible ravine had formed, completely separating the Anam Protectorate from the Mengshi, Yusang army. Both sides minded their own business. But once one side crossed the boundary, a new round of battle was about to begin. How is it? Have you counted our losses? On the summit, Luoji, Lin Wuxiu, and the other Anam Protectorate generals had gathered together to take stock of their losses. From the start of the battle until now, we've lost a total of 8,764 men. Lin Wuxiu glanced at the book that the bookkeeper officer had sent over, then raised his head and said to the people around him, in other words, we only have 91,000 men left. With these words, even the air seemed to grow heavier. From Lion City until now, almost everyone had been keeping track of the number of soldiers they had to face every day. In the first battle, they would almost always count the number of soldiers. The Mengshi, Yusang army had far too many soldiers. Standing on the summit, one would find themselves surrounded by an endless sea of people. This sort of pressure was actually quite formidable. If the Anam Protectorate wanted to survive, it had to do its utmost to treasure every soldier it had. This was only the first clash, but they had already lost nearly 1/10 of their soldiers. This was a very heavy piece of news for them. How many enemy casualties? A one-armed general asked. Although he only had one arm, this general was extremely muscular and valiant. The aura he exuded was even stronger than that of Luoji and Lin Wuxiu. And the most special thing about him was that he was holding an extremely heavy broadsword in his hand. This broadsword was more than half a foot wide and 6 feet long, and its blade was extremely thick and heavy. It was obvious at a glance that it had been specially made. This person was called Chen Guanshuan, one of the high-ranking generals of the Annam Protectorate. His nickname was the Mountain and River Blade, and in terms of status, he was above Luoji. In terms of strength, he was definitely ranked in the top 5 of the Annam Protectorate's generals. Let me take a look. Lin Wuxiu flipped to the next page. The Mengshi, Yusang army should have lost more than 80,000 soldiers, close to 90,000. According to the scribe officer, this is only a conservative estimate. Ah! Everyone's eyes lit up as they raised their heads. General Lin, are you sure you're not mistaken? One of the generals said excitedly. They only knew that the Mengshi, Yusang side had probably lost many people in the previous battle, but no one knew exactly how many. But now that the result was out, it had to be said that this result was far beyond everyone's expectations. There's no mistaking it. You should know the military regulations of the Annam Protectorate. It's impossible to make such a mistake. Lin Wuxiu said in an unquestionable tone. The scribe officer was responsible for recording military merits and losses. This was a major event in the army, and if there was a mistake, he or she would be beheaded. A casualty ratio of 10 to 1, this is simply inconceivable. Even when Protector Zhangqiu was around, there wasn't such a record. That young master. The Annam Protectorate general was so excited that he couldn't speak. It wasn't that there were no military strategists in the southwest. Whether it was Zhangqiu Jianxiong or Xianyu Zhongtong, both of them were decent strategists. But compared to Wang Chong, they were on a completely different level. I suddenly understand why Lord Zhangqiu would pass his token to this young duke. Lin Wuxiu sighed. Does that young master know of this matter? Chen Guanshuan turned his head and looked toward the summit. Against the backdrop of the mountain, Wang Chong's figure seemed insignificant. Even though this was not their first time seeing him, they still had a completely different feeling. The scribe officer should have already sent the news to that young master. Luoji also spoke, his voice brimming with respect. Everyone's lives were in Wang Chong's hands. In the southwest, it was impossible to find a more skilled strategist than Wang Chong. No. It wasn't just the southwest. At this moment, everyone felt that the young master's mastery of the art of war was probably the highest in the Central Plains. Let's go. Let's go see the young master as well. Also, let's spread the news of the casualties. I'd like to see who else in the army dares to oppose the young master. If anyone still dares to be ignorant of the current situation, then don't blame us for being impolite. Lin Wuxiu said. Chen Guanshuan nodded. There were actually quite a few people in the army who were opposed to Wang Chong taking over the Annam Protectorate. Otherwise, Wang Chong would have been able to order around far more generals. However, these people didn't say it out loud. Thus, Wang Chong couldn't do anything about it. But in private, as a fellow member of the Annam Protectorate, Chen Guanshuan knew. Regardless of what had happened in the past, from this moment onwards, no one would be allowed to oppose Wang Chong's orders. This was the consensus of everyone. Turning around, the group quickly headed up the mountain. Young Master, Uzan's and Meng Shizhao's forces should only have around 400,000 soldiers left. On the summit, Chen Shusun was flipping through the book in his hand as he spoke. But we only have around 90,000 soldiers left. Wang Chong nodded, his eyes still looking down the mountain. The advantage of standing on the summit was that one could see all the movements of the Mengshi, Yusang army. The last battle had already ended, but both Wang Chong and the generals of the Tang dynasty were keenly aware that this was far from over. Huishu Wuzong would not easily concede, nor would Daluan Ruozhen. Even Jelifeng and Duan Gechuan, these top-class figures of the Mengshi, Yusang army, had yet to truly take action. His father and Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong were still standing on the summit. The top-class forces had not yet been mobilized, so this battle was far from reaching the point where the map had been drawn and the dagger revealed. The battle will only get even more intense from now on. Chen Shusun suddenly said as he looked down the mountain. That's for sure. Wang Chong nodded. In the beginning, Uzun and Meng Shizhao had only been probing each other. The weakest soldiers would always be the first to be sent out. Thus, neither the White Stone Legion or the soldiers led by Jiao Sero were the strongest forces on either side. As the battle progressed, it would only get crueler and more intense. Young Master Chong, are you still not willing to come out and meet us? Suddenly, a loud voice came from the base of the mountain like a peal of thunder. The entire mountain fell silent. Wang Chong, Chen Shusun, and the eagle all stopped and looked down the mountain. Young Master, it's Daluan Ruozhen. The eagle looked at Wang Chong said. The moment the battle was over, he had returned to Wang Chong's side. Should we respond to him? Chen Shusun gazed at Wang Chong. Daluan Ruozhen is known as a wise minister, as intelligent as a fox. For him to invite young master at a time like this, he probably doesn't have good intentions. It's fine. Wang Chong waved his hand and faintly smiled. At a time like this, what tricks can he play? Besides, even if he wants to play some tricks, I have to be willing. As he spoke, Wang Chong's expression exuded extreme confidence. He knew that the one standing across from him was Uzun's wise minister, but the wise minister might not know that the one standing across from him was the war saint. No matter what sort of reputation Daluan Ruozhen had in the southwest or what sort of accomplishments he had, Wang Chong had nothing to fear. Wang Chong is here. Where is the Prime Minister? Wang Chong raised his robe and took 2 steps forward. Walala. At almost the same time, at the base of the mountain, the densely packed Uzun army parted. Daluan Ruozhen, dressed in a robe and waving his feather fan, calmly walked out. Is Wang Chong, young Master Wang, the descendant of the Tang dynasty's Duke Jiu? Daluan Ruozhen raised his head to the summit, his eyes fixed on Wang Chong. On the summit, Xianyu Zhongtong and Wang Yan trembled. The two glanced at each other and saw the same shock in each other's eyes. It was already impressive that Daluan Ruozhen could guess Wang Chong's name, but for him to guess that he was Duke Jiu's descendant, he had clearly thoroughly understood Wang Chong's identity and background. Correct. In front of the 3 armies, Wang Chong had no intention of hiding anything. Does the Prime Minister intend to ask for a truce at this time? Ha ha ha, young Master Wang really knows how to joke. Look around. Could it be that our Uzun and Meng Shizhao are the ones being surrounded? Daluan Ruozhen spread his arms and laughed. Since the Prime Minister thinks that victory is already in his grasp, why waste your breath? Just attack. Wang Chong laughed. Young Master is full of vigor and vigor. Daluan Ruozhen admires you. However, I wonder if the Tang dynasty soldiers are like you, fearless and unafraid of death. I only have a heart that cherishes talent. Young Master's talent is rare and your attainments in the art of war are even higher. It would be a pity if you were to die in the southwest. If young Master can lead the Annam Protectorate's soldiers to surrender, I am willing to let young Master, your father, and Protector General Xianyu live. Daluan Ruozhen looked at the summit and said sincerely. Prime Minister, that's a good plan. Then, what about the soldiers of the Annam Protectorate? Wang Chong sneered. Don't worry, young Master. Daluan Ruozhen will naturally let them live. However, they are soldiers after all. Nurturing a tiger will only bring harm to the tiger. If they return to the Central Plains and rejoin the army, wouldn't that be releasing the tiger back into the mountains and making them our enemy again? So, if we can come to an agreement, as long as they are willing to lay down their weapons, I am willing to exile them to Uzun or Meng Shizhao and let them live out their remaining years in peace. This is also a compromise. Daluan Ruozhen said with a sincere expression. Prime Minister, I have a better plan. Would Prime Minister like to hear it? Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh. I would like to hear the details. Chapter 588. If Prime Minister is willing to lead these Uzun cavalry into surrender and then have the Tsenpo enter the capital to beg for forgiveness from the Holy Emperor, he might be able to ensure the safety of Uzun and secure a corner of the Uzun plateau. Otherwise, a calamity will descend upon us. Wang Chong's words caused Daluan Ruozhen, Huishu Wuzong, and all the other generals of the Ngari royal lineage to pale. This was because Wang Chong had spoken in Uzun. Brat, how dare you? You dare to offend the Tsenpo. An Uzun general angrily bellowed, seemingly unable to restrain his rage. The other generals also had angry looks on their faces. Although the Uzun Empire was divided into 4 royal lineages, the Tsenpo possessed the supreme status. Even Daluan Ruozhen Huishu Wuzong had to be respectful before the Tsenpo, not daring to overstep his bounds. Young Master Wang, I believe that you were a refined person and that we could have a chat. I didn't think that you would be so impulsive. It won't do you any good to offend the Tsenpo. Daluan Ruozhen said, a displeased look on his face. In Uzun, the Tsenpo's status was even higher than that of the Holy Emperor. The reason was very simple. Although the Uzun Empire seemed to be divided into 4 royal lineages, the Tsenpo's status surpassed all. The internal hierarchy was even stricter than that of the Tang dynasty. Ha, Prime Minister, do you think that I'm purposefully provoking you? Wang Chong grinned, utterly disdainful of the rage of the Uzun generals. The Prime Minister is blinded by greed and only sees victory and defeat, but Wang Chong sees Uzun and the Tang dynasty. In the 4 poles and 8 wastelands, the Tang dynasty was in the middle region, and its strength was above all the countries. Prime Minister wouldn't have forgotten about the past, right? Within the 4 seas, the 8 desolations, and the 6 harmonies, there is no empire that can contend against the Tang dynasty. Uzun can't either. Even if the Prime Minister gathered Mengshi Zhao and gathered 500,000 soldiers, so what? In the end, he still couldn't deal with a mere 100,000 soldiers. And the Annan Protectorate manor is only one of the many. The Prime Minister only wants to gather the army to deal with the Tang dynasty today. I don't know if he has thought about what will happen when the Tang dynasty gathers the army to deal with Uzun in the future. As soon as Wang Chong finished speaking, the faces of Uzun and the others at the foot of the mountain changed. The strength of Uzun was inferior to that of the Tang dynasty, but no one had spoken as bluntly as Wang Chong. Moreover, even though they had no doubts about winning this war and occupying the southwest of the Tang dynasty, this involved the entire Tang dynasty. Not even Huishu Wuzong dared to speak carelessly. The Tang dynasty still had Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, Zhang Shogui, Wang Zhongxi, and Zhangqiu Jianxiong of the capital, and many, many more. This time, if not for Uzun's alliance and Jelifeng's defeat of the Tang dynasty at Irai, allowing the great powers to see the weakness of the Tang dynasty and feel that there was a chance, it would have been impossible for Uzun alone to challenge the Tang dynasty. This brat is truly more difficult to deal with than I imagined. Daluan Ruozhen's brow creased. He could clearly sense the change in the morale of his troops, and this was not the result he wanted. This was completely different from his plan of summoning Wang Chong to break the morale of the Tang dynasty. Prime Minister, there's no need to waste any more words with him. This child isn't easy to deal with. A deep and powerful voice came from the side. Huishu Wuzong frowned as he gave a rare interjection. He rarely interfered with Daluan Ruozhen's actions and plans, but this time, Huishu Wuzong had no choice but to intervene. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Daluan Ruozhen, but that the strength of the Tang dynasty and Uzun was clear for all to see. This was something that no one could deny. Not even Huishu Wuzong dared to say that Uzun could surpass the Tang dynasty. If that was really the case, why would he form an alliance with Mengshi Zhao? As the saying goes, a centipede dies but never falls down. Even if the current Tang dynasty wasn't as powerful as it used to be, it was still the most powerful empire on the continent. Its existence itself was a huge shadow to all the surrounding powers. Ha ha ha, young Master Wang, you're really good with words. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Young Master, if you have the time, you should worry about yourself. As for Ozan, in the past hundreds and thousands of years, Central Plains hasn't been able to conquer Ozan, so it's naturally impossible for them to do so in the next hundreds and thousands of years. Daluan Ruozan faintly smiled. Frankly speaking, Daluan Ruozan rather admired Wang Chong. Unfortunately, Wang Chong was a Tang people, an enemy of Ozan. The Tang people couldn't set foot on the plateau in the past, but that might not be the case in the future. In addition, if Ozan can flee back to the plateau, I wonder if King Jelifeng can as well. Wang Chong stood high on the summit, grinning as he turned his head in another direction. Buzz! Daluan Ruozan didn't react to Wang Chong's words, but Jelifeng, Fengjie, and the generals of the southwest all paled. They had been watching the clash between Wang Chong and Daluan Ruozan, but none of them had expected Wang Chong to suddenly turn his spear to them. The alliance between Meng Shizhao and Ozan had always had a hidden danger, and that was that Ozan and Meng Shizhao were different. Just as Wang Chong had said, if they couldn't win or if the situation changed, Ozan could retreat to the plateau at any time to protect themselves. But this was not the case for Meng Shizhao. The 6 Zhao of Irai occupied a certain geographical position. If Ozan withdrew, Meng Shizhao would have to confront the furious Tang dynasty alone. Meng Shizhao would never be able to respond with the strength of its country. Thus, from top to bottom, the Meng Shizhao Empire, including Jelifeng, had a secret concern. They were worried about Ozan, worried that Daluan Ruozan and Huishu Wuzong would not be willing to do their best and would withdraw at any time. But this matter was far too sensitive, so during the course of the alliance, no matter which side it was, they had cleverly avoided mentioning it. But now, Wang Chong had brought this matter that both sides feared the most into the open. King, this fellow has a sharp tongue. You can't answer him. Although Daluan Ruozan is known as a wise minister, he has truly found the wrong target this time. Next to Jelifeng, a fierce general of Meng Shizhao couldn't help but say. When Wang Chong and Daluan Ruozan were negotiating, they did not feel anything. But when Wang Chong pointed the spear at them, everything was different. Just one sentence was enough to make everyone's heart tremble. A strong sense of fear grew in their hearts. They felt that they would not be able to gain any advantage if they continued to negotiate with him. It's fine. Jelifeng's gaze was also fluctuating. But she quickly calmed her mind. She waved her hand and said, he's just a teenager. Since he took the initiative to answer, if we ignore him, it would be too cowardly. If we don't even have this bit of courage, and are afraid before we even see the holy emperor of the Tang dynasty, then what right does our Meng Shizhao have to compete with the Tang dynasty? This, Jelifeng showed no hesitation. As the hegemon of the southwest, a titan, if he didn't even have this boldness, then he would be a fool to call himself a hero. Young Master Wang is full of knowledge and talent. We are older than you by a generation, so we will not quibble with you. The Meng Shi-Yusang alliance has its own principles, so young Master Wang need not worry. But now that I think about it, your Wang clan and I are old friends. I once met your esteemed ancestor in the capital, and now that I think about it, his conduct and demeanor are still worthy of admiration. If young Master is able to return, please send my regards. Young Master, this Jelifeng is a crafty old fox. You can't fall for his tricks. The eagle's eyes widened as he hurriedly tried to stop Wang Chong. After staying in the capital for so long, the eagle had been influenced by what he had seen and heard. If Jelifeng's words were to reach the capital at dusk, the memorials of impeachment from the old imperial censors would fall like snowflakes. With so many people bearing witness, it was impossible for the Wang clan to escape the crime of colluding with Meng Shizhao and rebelling against the Tang dynasty. Even if this crime was cleared in the future, it would forever be a stain on the Wang clan. Whether it was in the government or in the military, they would encounter many obstacles, making it difficult for them to rise. "It's fine." Wang Chong grinned. He had been in the capital for so long and was a scion of a great clan, so how could he not know what Jelifeng was thinking? The imperial court had always been a place of groundless speculation, and the struggle for power was abnormally intense. In order to bring down their opponents, all sides would use any method they could think of. At the very least, if King Qi learned of this news, he would never let go of this chance and would use every possible method to suppress the Wang clan. Jelifeng is also a titan of the southwest. He's more familiar with the political tricks of the capital than anyone else. If I ignore him, something really will happen. The eagle, I know what you mean, but if we want to deal with Jelifeng, there's no need to be so passive, and there's no need to fear him. As Wang Chong spoke, he took 2 steps forward. Even in front of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers on 3 sides, he still exuded a transcendent aura. There's no need for greetings. The old master has a wise eye for talent. When I was in the capital and listened to him evaluate the heroes of the world, I heard him say that Jelifeng has a gentle face but a cold heart, a rebellious bone in his head. He seems benevolent but ruthless, and in the future, he will surely betray the Tang dynasty. Everything now confirms the old master's judgment. It seems that the old master has always loathed traitors like the king. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. In the future, the king should not bring up the matter of greetings again. Wang Chong loudly said to the vast army. Rumble. His voice echoed around the battlefield. Wang Chong had used a bit of stellar energy so that Wang Chong's voice could be heard for several li. Jelifeng actually smiled at this sight. Imperial Father, did Wang Zhuling really say this? Fenjie said. Everyone in the world said that Wang Zhuling had an eye for talent. Whether it was Meng Shizhao, the Abbasid Caliphate, or Karak Spazinu, anyone who had visited the capital of the Tang dynasty would know the name of Wuxia, and there was no one who did not respect this name. The Tang dynasty's current prosperity was inextricably linked to Wuxia. Even in a distant foreign land, he knew of the stories between the holy emperor of the Tang dynasty and the virtuous prime minister Wuxia. As a hostage in the Tang dynasty, Fenjie naturally had the same respect for the name of Wuxia. In this aspect, he was completely different from Jelifeng. Humph, you also believe it? It's just that brat's nonsense. Chapter 589. If Zhang Zhuling was really that formidable, then he wouldn't be a human, but a god. Our Meng Shizhao would never have a chance, so how could there be today's war? The Wang clan truly was famous, and the former prime minister of the Tang dynasty was even more so. However, Wang Chong's words could only deceive those who weren't in the know. To an ambitious and ruthless character like Jelifeng, Wang Chong's words were complete nonsense. It would be strange if he would even listen to a single word. Damn it! Fenjie immediately reacted, cursing in his heart. It was all because Wuxia's reputation was too great. Everyone said that Wuxia was virtuous and respected, and his reputation as a virtuous minister was even more so. Fenjie had a preconceived impression of Wang Chong and believed it to be true. This despicable and cunning fellow. There's no need to get angry at him. When 2 countries go to war, each side will use their own methods and will stop at nothing. This has always been the case. The urgent matter at hand is to think of a way to attack the Annam Protectorate. Jelifeng waved his hand. To tell the truth, if he didn't have to think of a way to sweep through the southwest as quickly as possible and capture this place, Jelifeng would have been rather interested in Wang Chong. It had been a long time since he had encountered such a formidable youth. Whether it was offense or defense, everything was seamless, leaving not the slightest opening. Given Jelifeng's background and the fact that he had set up such a grave crime as rebellion, anyone else would have fallen into his trap. But Wang Chong had instantly neutralized this most dangerous of political plots. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Putting aside the art of war, for him to be able to handle affairs and adapt to the situation to such a degree was truly not something an ordinary person could compare to. This was also the reason why Jellyfang had made the prompt decision to not pursue the matter any further. "Follow me." Jellyfang unfolded his robe, turned around, and strode towards Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong. Almost at the same time, Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong led all the Yuzhen generals toward Jellyfang. Although they walked different paths, in certain aspects, as the leaders of the Southwest, the two of them shared the same line of thought. "Does the Prime Minister have any ideas?" Jellyfang went straight to the point and said in a deep voice. "This kid is not easy to deal with." Daluan Ruozhen took a deep breath. "Our top priority now is to remove his defenses on the mountain. Without those steel defenses, the less than 100,000 soldiers of the Southwestern Protectorate Army would be completely incapable of stopping our army." "Yeah." Jellyfang also let out a long sigh. The Tang dynasty dominated the world with their infantry. Positional warfare and defensive warfare have always been their forte. The Wang clan seemed to be especially skilled in this aspect. In the Battle of Irai, we were able to completely defeat the Annam Protectorate, but it's impossible here. Jellyfang and Meng Shizhao's army had the deepest understanding of the changes in the Tang dynasty. From relying on their advantage in numbers to swiftly rout the Great Tang, to losing nearly 70,000 soldiers on the mountain, the Annan Protectorate army had completely changed in the minds of the Tang. The difference between the Annan Protectorate army and the Great Tang army was like the difference between heaven and earth. We underestimated this kid. He came prepared. He's the one we underestimated the most in this war. A Meng Shizhao general suddenly said. His words silenced everyone. Yes, rather than saying that they had underestimated the Annam Protectorate, it was more accurate to say that they had underestimated a single person. Whether it was Lion City, these scattered fortresses, or even the massive transformation of the Annam Protectorate, they had all been brought about by a single person. From a certain perspective, this war was a war between the Mengshi, Yusang army and one person. That person from the Tang dynasty had only sent one person to completely tip the scales of this war, as well as alter the course of this war that should have been in the bag. Imperial Father, Prime Minister, and generals, I feel that we shouldn't overestimate that kid in this matter. Fenjie suddenly spoke, a pensive look on his face. Oh. These words instantly attracted everyone's attention. Does your Highness Crown Prince have a wise opinion? Daluan Ruozhen faintly smiled, appearing to be all ears. I wouldn't dare to say that I have a wise opinion, but has everyone forgotten why the Tang people chose to break out of the encirclement? Fenjie said pensively. Buzz. Fenjie's words caused everyone's eyes to brighten. Indeed, in terms of safety, Lion City was even safer than this place. The Annam Protectorate had chosen to break out of the encirclement rather than remain in the city for a very simple reason. They ran out of food. A Meng Shizhao general suddenly said, revealing the crux of the problem. That's right. The Annam Protectorate left Lion City because their food supply was about to run out. There are nearly 100,000 men and horses. The people and horses have to eat, drink and poop. This is not a small number. Fenjie's eyes shone with a sharp light, his gaze growing sharper and sharper. No matter how formidable that brat is, do you think he can conjure up enough food for 100,000 soldiers? The war in the southwest has only been going on for a little more than a month. Before the soldiers have moved, the rations have moved. This one once lived in the Tang dynasty, so I was fortunate enough to have some understanding of them. The Tang dynasty is different from us. Their territory is vast. In order to gather an army of 100,000 soldiers, they would need to gather them from all the prefectures and counties of the empire. The entire process is time-consuming and laborious, requiring a very long time. When I was studying in the capital during the Tang dynasty, I was fortunate enough to look up the historical records of the Tang dynasty. For the empires of the Central Plains, a 3-month war requires 3 years of food preparation and preparation. Moreover, the further north they go, the poorer the land and the lower the yield. They aren't like our Mengshi Zhao, where the sun is abundant, and we can produce more rice than them. Thus, I can be sure that the Tang dynasty cannot prepare enough food for 100,000 soldiers in a short period of time. Even if that brat has wings on both sides, he can't conjure up enough food for 100,000 soldiers. Even if they surround the summit so tightly that not even a drop of water can trickle through, as long as we surround them and don't attack, they will die without question. When the time comes, it won't be us who will attack them, but them who will have to think of a way to break out and leave. As he spoke, Fenjie clenched his fists, his eyes blazing. Putting aside his status as the crown prince of Mengshi Zhao, no one had ever been able to outshine Fenjie in front of so many people like Wang Chong. Although Fenjie had never said it, he had long ago viewed Wang Chong as a thorn in his side. Your Highness the Crown Prince speaks correctly. Even if we don't do anything, as long as we don't let the Anam Protectorate escape, they will quickly collapse without enough food. No matter what, they have no chance of winning this war. A Mengshi Zhao general immediately agreed. Jelifeng slightly creased her brow, but she said nothing. Your Highness the Crown Prince's view coincides with this one's. But right now, there is still a small problem. Doluan Ruozhen faintly smiled as he suddenly spoke. Oh. Fenjie's brows rose, but he quickly lowered his head and modestly said, I would like to hear Prime Minister's wise opinion. Your Highness the Crown Prince is a dragon among men. It's already quite good that you have noticed this. The problem of food truly is the lifeline of the Tang people, but this war is somewhat different from the past. Why does Your Highness the Crown Prince believe that we can attack the Tang people without worrying about attacks from other sides? A look of hesitation appeared in Fenjie's eyes. Prime Minister's opinion is. Just as that Wang Chong said, the Tang dynasty has 4 prefectures, Annan, Anshi, and Anbei, as well as 5 armies, Longshi's Big Dipper army. Right now, the other 4 armies have no time to deal with us because we have reached an agreement with the Abbasid Caliphate, Karak-Spazinu, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, the Goguryeo Empire, the Shi, and the Khitans. The tallest tree in the forest is the first to be blown down by the wind. It's not just us who want to deal with the Tang dynasty, but them as well. Thus, this is the reason they are willing to help us restrain the Tang dynasty's forces. But if we drag things out for a long time and we can't take the southwest, then the situation will be completely different. Once they believe that the Tang dynasty is still the same Tang dynasty, undefeatable, they will retreat. At that time, all of you should know what we will be facing. Doluan Ruozhen's words instantly silenced everyone. In truth, this was not some profound problem. It was just that as generals, they would subconsciously consider the problems at hand, the problems of the military, and not the problems of the overall situation or strategy. With the war in the southwest having reached this stage, there was no time to waste. There was no time to wait for the Annam Protectorate to collapse on its own. The earlier they attacked the Annam Protectorate, the earlier they could settle the situation in the southwest. It would also allow the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, Goguryeo, the Shi, the Khitans, and the other factions to settle down and join the war against the Tang dynasty. Time was fleeting, and the longer they delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for the Mengshi, Yusang army. On this point, Jelifeng was more anxious than anyone else. After all, Uzun's men had a path of retreat, but Mengshi Zhao's men did not. At this stage, costs were no longer considered. Thus, in the last 2 days of battle, Mengshi Zhao had lost so many soldiers, including the heavy losses suffered by the White Stone Legion, that Jelifeng had not even mentioned. As an ambitious and ruthless person, Jelifeng was undoubtedly qualified. But Fenjie clearly did not understand the anxiety in Jelifeng's heart. Let's talk about the Tang rations later. Zhao Yuofeng suddenly interrupted at this moment. Prime Minister, do you have any wise ideas about the current situation? There's no other way at the moment. Daluan Ruozan shook his head and decisively said. If we want to deal with the Annam Protectorate, it's very simple. We first have to remove those steel walls they've erected on the mountain. If we can't do this, we'll have to pay the same enormous price as before. But that Qilan son of the Wang clan truly isn't simple. If my guess is correct, he's probably brought an entire team of craftsmen here so that they can repair those steel walls at any time. If we attack at any time, he can repair it at any time. If this continues, there's no way to proceed. If we try to forcefully attack, we'll have to pay an even greater price than we imagined. If Prime Minister is worried about those steel walls, then leave the rest to us. Duan Yongyan, I'll leave the rest to you. Chapter 590. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I will definitely complete the mission. The general named Duan Yongyan turned around and left amidst the clanging sound of his armor plates. Since Your Majesty has already made arrangements, then Daluan Ruozan will wait for good news from Your Majesty. If Your Majesty needs anything, please let me know. Uzan will definitely do his best to help. Daluan Ruozan said quickly. Well, Prime Minister, thank you for your hard work. It's time for us to do something. Jelifeng just nodded and separated from Daluan Ruozan. She quickly turned around and left. Do you really believe what His Royal Highness said? Besieging but not attacking, and the Tang people will collapse? After leaving the meeting place, Wuxia Wuzong suddenly said. When Daluan Ruozan and Jelifeng were talking, he basically remained silent the whole time and did not intervene in their conversation at all. But at this time, he suddenly spoke. Some things are not easy to say in front of His Royal Highness. Think about it, since that brat came prepared and prepared so many steel walls, do you think he would have prepared sufficient military rations? Daluan Ruozan waved his feather fan and said calmly. Wuxia Wuzong was startled and immediately stopped. But soon, Wuxia Wuzong caught up with him. But the Tang people's diet is completely different from ours. We can drink horse's milk, goat's milk, and only eat meat without rice, but they can't. And in such a short time, can they really do it? They have prepared for so long in Lion City, but it didn't take more than a month, did it? I don't know about this either. Hearing this, Daluan Ruozan stopped. But you have seen the result of the battle so far. That guy can't be judged by common sense. Although with the past practice of the Middle-earth dynasty, I don't believe he can gather so much food in such a short time. But I also don't believe he is not prepared at all. No matter what, we have to think of a way to conquer the Annam Protectorate first. As for the issue of food, we will soon find out how much food they have, how much food they have stored, and how much food they have prepared. After saying this, Daluan Ruozan quickly walked forward. Is everything fixed? On the summit, beneath the fluttering banner of the Great Tang, Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji stood facing each other. Zhang Shouji's face was full of sweat and he looked very tired. Ever since the construction of Lion City, he hadn't rested for a long time. Looking at Zhang Shouji's exhausted look, Wang Chong secretly felt sorry for him. But now, the fate of the soldiers of the southwest and the entire Tang dynasty rested on this battle. Wang Chong simply had no time to feel pity. He couldn't even say that he wanted to rest. Young Master's modular city walls are indeed exquisite. Although it looked like it had been smashed quite badly, many of the steel modules could be reused after some repairs. And this way, the damage won't be too severe. Based on Young Master's blueprints, we've already repaired nearly 90% of the walls. Zhang Shouji said. It's fine. It's fine as long as 90% can be used. Wang Chong nodded. The massive fireball attacks of Uzan's men had still had some effect. Nearly 10% of the walls had been damaged. But to Wang Chong, this was no longer important. As long as there was a war, there would inevitably be losses, and they were facing famed generals like Daluan Ruozan and Huishu Wuzang. 10% of the damage was completely normal. Moreover, 90% of the steel walls was enough to defend the Annam Protectorate and not affect the rest of the war. In addition, Zhang Shouji smiled as he spoke, but before he could finish, his vision swayed and he almost fell to the ground. "Grandmaster, are you okay?" Wang Chang's heart tightened as he hurriedly went to support Zhang Shouji. "Master! Master!" Around them, a few of Zhang Shouji's disciples felt their hearts tighten as they hurriedly rushed forward to support Zhang Shouji. These were all Zhang Shouji's closest disciples, all of whom had been under his tutelage for more than 7 to 8 years. To Zhang Shouji, they were like a father. I'm fine. I'm just a little tired and didn't rest well." Zhang Shouji waved at everyone with a smile on his face. It was at this moment that Wang Chong realized that under Zhang Shouji's dark and dusty skin, he was actually completely pale. Wang Chang's heart also ached as he hurriedly called out to the people behind him, "Quick, pour some water for Grandmaster. Grandmaster has worked hard, you should rest well." Wang Chong helped him to sit down. Now that he thought about it, ever since he had met Zhang Shouji, if he wasn't having him build a city, then he was having him build a steel wall. Each of these things was a massive undertaking that required Zhang Shouji's constant supervision. In the entire project, everyone could rest, but only he couldn't. Especially after the war in the southwest had broken out, Zhang Shouji's mind had been completely focused on this project. Now that he thought about it, Wang Chong suddenly realized that he had often overlooked the fact that Zhang Shouji was different from himself, and even different from those soldiers. He was just an ordinary person. Zhang Shouji did not know martial arts. And from last night until now, in order to build these steel walls, he had actually not rested at all. Young master doesn't need to consider me. To be able to follow at young master's side and do something for the Tang dynasty, for the Tang dynasty's army, and for the common people of the southwest is the proudest and happiest thing that Zhang Shouji has ever done in his life. Even when I was building a palace for the imperial household, this old man was not so happy. It's enough for me to experience this once in my life. Zhang Shouji waved his hand. His expression was carefree, and there was an indescribable gratification in it. "Young master, if there's anything you need, just tell me. If you need this old man, young master, just tell me." Wang Chong nodded. Seeing Zhang Shouji's gaze, Wang Chong knew that anything else he said would be superfluous. Buzz. A finger suddenly pressed against Zhang Shouji's sleeping acupoints. It was not Wang Chong, but Qin Shusun. "Take Master Zhang away. Before he wakes up, no one is allowed to wake him up," Qin Shusun said. "Is young master all right?" Wang Chong nodded. "Master Shouji has expended too much energy, and I heard from his disciple that he hasn't rested in the last few days. We can't let him work too hard. In truth, in previous battles, we rarely allowed craftsmen to participate. No one in the Tang dynasty has ever done what young master has done. I don't know if this is good or bad," Qin Shusun said. "Perhaps not in the past, but there will definitely be in the future. The form of war will also have to change a little," Wang Chong said. "That's right, Lord Protector General sent me to ask. Does young master have any thoughts on the upcoming war?" Qin Shusun said. Xianyu Zhongtong currently held a great deal of respect for Wang Chong. The fact that he had sent someone to inquire about Wang Chong's opinion was enough to show his attitude. "I don't know for now." Wang Chong shook his head. "In the current situation, the Mengshi, Yusang army is far superior to us. We are better suited for defense than offense. Positional and defensive battles are advantageous to us, but taking the initiative to attack might not necessarily be advantageous. At the very least, in this situation, we have the advantage," Wang Chong said. This mountain had actually already been transformed by Wang Chong into a fortress. Although it seemed to be segmented and filled with gaps, Uzun's cavalry were actually unable to display their might here. On the contrary, Lion City was more advantageous to the Uzun army. At the very least, their speed would not be reduced. And the siege ladders that Uzun had painstakingly built with so much manpower and resources were completely useless here. The walls were still there, but the siege ladders were useless. Moreover, Xianyu Zhongtong's strategy in Lion City was different. Wang Chong had adopted an aggressive defensive strategy. All the walls had been built in sections so that Yu Sang and Meng Shizhao would not be able to break through. At this stage of the battle, the Tang dynasty had no path of retreat. When an empire lost the respect of the surrounding countries, the only method was to openly defeat them on the battlefield, crush them, and win back their dignity. As for Wang Chong, he had no other choice. If he wanted to prevent the empire behind him from sinking into a quagmire of decline, and disaster, and change the empire's miserable fate, the only way was to completely defeat the Mengshi, Yu Sang army. No matter what price he had to pay. Roar! As he was speaking, the rear of Meng Shizhao's army suddenly became restless, the roar of a beast resounding through the clouds. The Meng Shizhao army on the left and right were thrown into an uproar, all of them scattering like they had run into the plague. Young master, what is that? Eagle suddenly couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. Wang Chong said nothing, but his eyes were madly twitching. He had heard this sort of roar before, but it did not belong to this world. Giant elephants. Wang Chong muttered. What? Eagle subconsciously asked. But before he could finish, he was drowned out by a heaven-shaking rumble. Rumble. From a distance, the earth seemed to be quaking, as if some massive creature was walking out from behind it. In just a few breaths' time, a black silhouette the size of a hill slowly appeared in everyone's field of vision from afar. These black shadows were extremely heavy, their bodies seemingly brimming with immense strength. Just by looking at them from a distance, one could feel a powerful pressure. And when one saw the ant-like Meng Shizhao soldiers next to them, this pressure only intensified. Boom! The originally quiet mountain suddenly burst into a buzzing sound, with a hint of panic. None of the 180,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers that had survived until now were ordinary. Whether it was in spirit or will, they were the elite of the elite. But when they saw those black shadows, even before they could see them clearly, their morale was already shaken. This was not a common sight. The White Elephant Corps. Chapter 591. The White Elephant Corps. Wang Chong turned his head. Although he had many memories from his previous life, none of them could compare to these old generals who had spent their entire lives dealing with Meng Shizhao and who had experienced the Battle of Irai. Chen Shusun nodded, his expression extremely grave. The Irai region is different from the Central Plains. The trees there are lush and the climate is hot. There are many wild behemoths there, and one of them has a long trunk and immense strength. Meng Shizhao calls it a giant elephant. Jelifang had long ago wanted to tame these behemoths, and in the end, they managed to train an army called the White Elephant Corps. This White Elephant Corps doesn't have many people, but they are extremely formidable. We suffered a great loss at their hands in the Battle of Irai. A large number of soldiers died at their hands. Chen Shusun said. Rumble. The earth quaked as the behemoth corps got closer and closer. Finally, Wang Chong saw the giant elephant corps that Chen Shusun had spoken of. These were massive elephants. Although Wang Chong had seen elephants before, these elephants were completely different from the ones in Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong had never seen such massive elephants. Each elephant was 6 or 7 meters tall, with some even reaching 8 or 9 meters. Just looking at their massive bodies was enough to stun one's heart. How could there be such large elephants? Wang Chong was also stunned. Wang Chong had never seen this White Elephant Corps, nor did he have any impression of them. They had probably been destroyed when the otherworldly invaders had appeared. But when he saw these massive elephants, Wang Chong felt an unimaginable shock. The adult wild elephants of the African continent, even the largest, were only 4 meters tall, but the elephants of the White Elephant Corps were more than twice as tall, and their bodies were 16 or 17 meters long. Their protruding tusks were 3 or 4 meters long. Even with Wang Chong's experience, he had never seen such massive wild elephants. These white elephants are even wearing armor. The eagle murmured. Compared to Wang Chong, who had seen it before, he was still mentally prepared. However, the eagle was completely unprepared. The eagle felt an indescribable shock at the sight of such a colossal creature. Its inscription elephant armor. Wang Chong murmured. The eagle was right. These elephants were covered in thick white armor, similar to the white plate armor worn by the Yuzhan people. Each plate armor was at least a foot thick and covered in inscriptions. With just a glance, Wang Chong immediately recognized that those were the toughening and defensive inscriptions that he was most familiar with. Given the thickness of the plate armor, even ballistae would find it very difficult to deal any substantial damage to them. In fact, the most shocking thing was the size of these elephants. Elephant armor, inscriptions. I'm afraid each of these elephants weighs more than 10,000 pounds. They're even heavier than a steel city wall. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Each of the steel walls that Wang Chong had constructed weighed several thousand pounds, but compared to Meng Shizhao's elephants, they seemed insignificant. Wang Chong suddenly understood what Meng Shizhao was planning. Assemble the ballistae and prepare to intercept them. Wang Chong ordered. Yes, young master. The messengers quickly left to carry out the order. At the same time, Meng Shizhao's army was also undergoing a transformation. Ha! Ha! Amidst the shouts, the Meng Shizhao soldiers surged forward around the white elephants, forming a human wall in front of the elephants as they pushed forward. And then, the most worrying matter occurred. Roar! Ha! Following a series of shouts, one large shield after another flipped up, forming a huge shield above their heads and pushing it towards the mountain. Seeing this, it wasn't just Wang Chong. Chen Shuchong, Wang Yan, Xianyu Zhongtong, the Eagle, Luoji, and Lin Wushu all paled. No matter how slow they were, they understood that these shield-bearers were there to protect the white-armored elephants. Rumble. The earth shook as the White Elephant Corps got closer and closer. Standing on a high mountain peak, one could see one giant elephant after another constantly approaching. 1, 2, 3, 4, on the vast land, if one were to take a closer look, there were more than 1,000 of these elephants that were scattered all over the place, and they were approaching the mountain range. Although there weren't many of them, they were spread out over the vast plain, giving off an intimidating pressure. Ha! Ha! Finally, with an ear-piercing roar, the first wave of the White Elephant Corps finally reached the base of the mountain. Ready, fire! With this order, countless arrows hauled down from the sky like locusts. Ding, 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 the arrows rained down on the 7 to 8 meters tall elephant. Ding, ding, dang, 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 all of them were blocked. The white elephant armor was like a thick wall, blocking all the arrows outside. Ready. At almost the same time, the White Elephant Corps soldiers reacted, raising their shields high above their heads. 7 or 8 soldiers rushed forward. Some of them slid down the elephant's trunk and opened up their shields to protect the elephant's tiny eyes. Not a single arrow was able to get close. And it was far from over. Begin. A white-armored Meng Shizhao officer raised his sword and swung it down. Swish! Countless chains flew out, vibrating in the air as if they had a mind of their own, quickly locking down the steel walls. The other end of the chain was quickly locked onto the elephant's body. Pull! Following the order, smoke and dust billowed on the mountain, and the huge steel wall collapsed with a loud bang. Then, with the help of iron chains, it was quickly dragged out of the mountain. In the face of the elephant's enormous strength, even the 7,000 to 8,000 Jin steel walls that Wang Chong had spent a great deal of wealth seemed insignificant. In the blink of an eye, a huge steel wall was dragged away by the giant elephant. Without the cover of the steel walls, the Annan Protectorate soldiers behind the walls all had unsightly expressions. "Let's go, let's go. Hurry and report to the lords. Let them decide." In the face of the swarm of White Elephant Corps soldiers, the entire phalanx turned pale and rushed higher up the mountain. "Ha ha ha, we've lost, the Tang dynasty has lost." The Mengshi Zhao army cheered. The mistakes of the past serve as a lesson for the future. The previous bitter defeat had left everyone deeply fearful of the Annan Protectorate army. But this time, the situation was completely different. Without the protection of the steel walls, the Annan Protectorate's advantage was gone, and they could no longer hold on. Rumble. With a rumble, in the blink of an eye, another steel wall collapsed, bound by 7 or 8 chains, and was dragged away by the elephant step by step. Boom! 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 One wall after another, they fell one after another. In a short period of time, at least 30 to 40 steel walls were dragged away. Hold on, don't let them drag you away. Behind a steel wall, more than 20 Annan Protectorate soldiers were doing their best to drag the steel walls in front of them, engaging in a tug-of-war with the elephant. But in the next moment, with a rumble, dust roiled, and a huge rumble, more than 20 Annan Protectorate soldiers, along with the heavy steel walls, were all dragged down the mountain by the elephant. Ah! Screams rang out from the top of the mountain. Although they knew that the elephant was extremely powerful, no one had expected it to reach this level. More than 20 elite warriors at the peak of the true martial realm joined hands, but they were still not a match for this giant elephant. I'm afraid that even those at the 3rd or 4th tier of the profound martial realm wouldn't be a match for it. The eagle's eyelids twitched when he saw this scene. He had already broken through to the 3rd or 4th tier of the profound martial realm. In other words, in terms of pure strength, if he didn't use the 6-armed Ksitigarbha Vajra Guardian, even he wouldn't be a match for this elephant. And giant elephants like this could be found everywhere in the White Elephant Legion. The situation isn't looking good. In order to deal with the Tang dynasty, Jelifeng has schemed and schemed. This White Elephant Corps is actually a result of his meticulous accumulation to deal with the Tang dynasty in positional warfare. Chen Shusun said. More than 1,000 elephants. Their strength is basically between the 3rd or 4th tier of the profound martial realm and the 8th or 9th tier. Some of them are even close to the peak of the 9th tier. Chen Shusun looked at an 11 or 12 meter tall elephant in the distance. That was probably the oldest, tallest, and strongest elephant in the entire White Elephant Corps. Many of the hairs on its body were gray-white. But its steps were still light and agile. This was probably the Elephant King of the White Stone Legion. Not even Chen Shusun had the confidence to deal with such an Elephant King. Such an Elephant King in addition to more than 1,000 elephants posed an enormous threat to the Tang dynasty. If Meng Shizhao's people completely uproot these steel walls, even if we still have an army of 90,000, we really will be doomed. Chen Shusun said in a low voice. The Annan Protectorate had dealt with Meng Shizhao's White Elephant Corps before. Chen Shusun was well aware of the White Elephant Corps' power. In terms of status, of Meng Shizhao's 4 elite legions, the White Elephant Corps was actually far above the White Stone Legion. The reason it hadn't reached Uzin's first legion was because the White Elephant Corps didn't have that many of them. There were only 1,000 or so of them. Humph, elephants are just inanimate objects. I don't believe they can be as nimble as martial artists. If it weren't for the protection of Meng Shizhao's troops, these elephants would be nothing more than targets. A voice came from the side. At some point, Lin Wusu and the others had walked up. As soon as they arrived, they turned their gazes to Wang Chong on the summit. Young master, let me lead some men to kill these elephants. This general is confident that we can stop Meng Shijiao's people at the base of the mountain. No need. Wang Chong waved his hand, his gaze fixed on the base of the mountain. We still haven't reached that step. Boom, boom, boom. Just as everyone was talking, another steel city wall was uprooted and dragged out by the giant elephants, leaving a long mark on the ground. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.